An unexpected encounter marked the beginning of Jin von Largenia's tale. Just 12 years old, he stumbled upon a large, fierce dragon, yet there wasn't a hint of terror on Jin's face. Instead, he was simply amazed to find such a magnificent creature living so close, even praising his own luck at the discovery. As the terrifying dragon lashed out, baring its sharp teeth, Jin wasted no time and activated his magic-enhanced skill, Divine Protection, and swiftly dodged the attack. With another rapid move, he formed a magic circle and unleashed a powerful wind attack, slicing the massive dragon into as the creature thumped to the ground. Jin realized the full extent of his magical capabilities, confident that he could easily handle his upcoming meeting with his father. The following day inside the Grand House of Largenia, Jin's father stood before him with a firm expression. He asked who Jin thought made it possible for him to finally turn 12 years old, and without a moment's hesitation, Jin responded that it was undoubtedly all thanks to his father. However, their conversation was abruptly cut short when other children nearby scoffed, calling Jin bold for addressing the man as father. They mocked him, claiming he was merely from a lowly Corners lineage and nothing more than a slight little thief, just like his mother. One boy closed in and whispered to Jin viciously that he was merely the filthy child of a woman who had seduced their father and gotten pregnant, further calling him at 30 brats. Listening to these insults, Jin couldn't help but grit his teeth as a surge of anger and frustration built within him. Just then, his father informed Jin that he had called him for a reason, further accusing Jin of not only selling Alfonso's precious spellbook, but also the respected family sword. He added that Alfonso had personally told him about Jin sneaking around the antique shop. Upon hearing these grave accusations, Jin desperately told his father that he hadn't done anything of the sort. The kids beside them grinned slightly, remarking that Jin was truly a thief's child just as they had suspected. Angered, Jin turned to them, shrieking that he was not a thief and commanding them to never speak ill of his mother again. However, his father ignored all of Jin's desperate pleas and stated his disappointment in him. He then coldly informed Jin that, as a token of mercy, he would allow him to choose between two paths. One was to become Alfonso's designated playmate and never again interfere in the affairs of the family, and the other was to leave the House of Largenia permanently. The boy standing next to Jin scoffed, remarking that Jin was an easy target, confidently claiming he could easily smash in with magic. Jin's father smirked sinisterly, asserting that Jin would amount to nothing without the prestige of the House of Largenia. With an initial stern expression, Jin declared that there was no way he would be leaving the house, but his expression and choice abruptly changed the moment. His father revealed that he would be Alfonso's plume. Upon hearing his blunt response, the boy interrupted in question with a fierce expression how Jin dared to speak that way in front of their father. However, Jin asked casually why he was reacting so strongly. Angered by this comeback, the boy wasted no time activating his magic and hurling it towards Jin, stating that Jin should just shut his mouth and serve as his test subject. As the attack landed, the boy snickered as he believed that his spell was successful. But his expression soon crumbled when he saw that Jin had effortlessly dodged the strike, leaving a gaping hole in a wall behind. Immediately, the pillar above them crumbled from the impact and the entire ceiling began to fall. As everyone watched with their mouths widened in astonishment, Jin casually remarked that it was just as he expected of Alphonse, finding the act of destroying the house with magic to be on a completely different level. Without another word, he bid them farewell and thanked them for everything they had provided him until now. The scene then shifted to the past, to Jin's 12th birthday, the day he had abruptly reincarnated into Jin von Largenia's body after suffering a major traffic accident in his previous life. As Jin gradually processed everything, he couldn't quite comprehend the name because it felt quite familiar, as though he had heard it somewhere before. But before he could process anything further, it maid appeared from behind and abruptly poured water on his head. She complained of the hateful expression that he was hindering her clean duties and rudely told him to move aside. Panic-stricken, he immediately apologized to her and bolted from the spot. He then rushed to a mirror and saw his own reflection, finally realizing that he had reincarnated into a character from a game he used to play in his past life. This game was popularly known as the Holy Sword Hero and the 7 Battle Maidens. However, that wasn't the only significant detail. In the game, the chosen hero battled the Demon Lord alongside the 7 Maidens, and despite being a dating sim, the characters were remarkably well developed, with even the villains standing out. Among the characters in the game, Jin von Largenia was infamous as the worst of the worst, and there was a clear reason for this label. When he turned 15, he faced a brutal rejection by Flora, his fiancée, and one of the 7 maidens. To add insult to his injury, he was also defeated by the protagonist for no reason. Having lost Flora and suffered defeat at the hands of the hero, Jin was subsequently cast out by his own family. His repeated confrontations with the hero, who overwhelmingly surpassed him in strength, caused him to plunge down a path of evil, ultimately creating more chaos than even the demon lord. He showed no mercy even to women and children, and found extreme delight in committing rural acts against innocent people. As a result, Jin became known throughout the gaming community as the worst character in the game. Upon realizing this fate, Jin panicked. He urgently wondered how old he was at this precise moment, and contemplated if he could access his status as he could in the game. He commanded in a low, soft voice for his status to appear, and immediately a long status screen appeared right in front of him. Without wasting any more time, he examined the details and noted that he was currently 12 years old, further considering himself lucky to have escaped his destined fall into darkness before it began. As he further inspected his status board, he pondered that he was still the strongest cheat character in the game, just as he had anticipated. Now, Jin was absolutely certain that this was indeed the world of the Holy Sword hero and the 7 battle maidens. Most importantly, he knew that something major would happen after his 12th birthday, and he needed to test his magic thoroughly before jumping to any conclusions. Back in the present moment, Jin handed over a seal letter to the maid and requested her to deliver it to his fiancée. Then he stood in front of his mother's painting and spoke to her with a saddened voice, telling her he was breaking ties with that family. Although it was commonly believed that Jin's mother had died of a disease, it was undeniably clear to Jin that she had been poisoned. Losing his only ally, his mother must have been a devastating blow for the game's Jin, but his reincarnated self knew there was no use dwelling on it. Moreover, in the game's original storyline, Jin had not left the mansion but had stayed there instead, and 3 years later, at the age of 15, he would have been formally cast out by his family, which would have set him firmly on the dark path. However, by leaving the house now, Jin was already on a completely different path from that awful future. Armed with the knowledge from his past life, he was sure he could manage whatever lay ahead of him. As Jin reached the mansion's gate, the guard on duty inquired if he was lost, further informing him that the counter-district began just past their formidable walls. Jin immediately offered a confident smile, assuring the guard he would be fine. However, the guard cautioned him about the counter-district, labeling it a melting pot for better or worse. Yet Jin paid little attention to the warning and eagerly set his foot outside the gate, his mind consumed by the thought that he had already decided to completely avoid his destined dark path and escape his bad end at all costs. As Jin wandered through the bustling street, he observed the NPCs, noticing how incredibly alive they felt compared to the game he once played. Setting his thoughts aside, he concluded that if he wanted to earn money, becoming an adventurer was definitely the best path. Adventurers was the epitome of freedom, where status was proven, and wealth and fame were directly tied to skill. Given that he had been kicked out from the House of Largenia, this career seemed to be his most viable option. He knew that the Adventure Guild was a crucial facility in the game for both money-making and character encounters. As soon as Jen stepped inside the Adventure Guild house, he found himself stumbling upon a beastkin lady directly in front of him. Though he didn't immediately realize he had been staring at her for quite some time, the lady named Elsa leaned in and remarked in a flirtatious manner that it was hard for her not to be flustered when he stared at her like that. Furthermore, judging by his attire, Elsa commented that he appeared to be from a noble family. She closed in, offering him a night quest for 10 gold coins, when another man from behind sternly told her not to mess with Jin. Jin immediately moved Elsa aside and informed her that he was not yet registered as an adventurer. However, Elsa kept up her teasing, suggesting Jin immediately get his first time over with. As Jin was contemplating whether such events were even in the game, another woman named Fine interjected, asking Elsa to stop bothering him. Right then, Fine apologized to Jen and introduced herself as the guild house's receptionist, asking if Jen was ready for newbie registration. Upon seeing her, Jin remained dazed for a moment but immediately snapped out of it, admitting he was indeed ready for his registration. Jin thought to himself that while guild characters were generic faces in the game, everyone was surprisingly good-looking now that he was witnessing them with his own eyes. Right that instant, Fine handed Jen registration form and even asked if he knew how to fill it out. As Jin was diligently completing the form, he pondered that Fine was truly kind, just as she had been depicted in the game. After he finished, Fine glanced over it for a moment and inquired if Jin was ready to take on requests right away. However, Jin appeared puzzled as he currently had no gear or weapons with him. Fine added to his concern, commenting that some adventurers underestimated the importance of their equipment and ended up losing their lives. Fine even offered to introduce him to a blacksmith. On the other hand, Jin felt the sense of reassurance knowing Fine would consistently keep an eye on adventurers' safety from that moment onwards. To her generous offer, Jin politely declined and informed her that he already had a lead on where he should go next for equipment. Fine agreed and handed in his guild card, officially concluding the registration procedure. Jin was pleasantly surprised that it had all gone smoother than he had anticipated. On the spur of the moment, the guild members behind them hardly congratulated Jin and warmly welcomed him to the chaotic world of adventures. Not long after, as Jin stepped out of the guild house, he remained surprised at how those side characters possessed such vibrant personalities, which he had largely ignored in the game, though he now felt quite refreshed by this new perspective. Moreover, he contemplated that if only the original Jin and the story had chosen to become an adventure, there might have been a way for him to avoid falling into darkness. However, the current Jin knew he couldn't let his guard down, because he didn't know when he might stumble back onto that dangerous path. To avoid the dark path, Jin needed to gear up first, and he decided to utilize his gain knowledge from his previous life to acquire the most beneficial items. Jin now stood in front of an abandoned-looking house, and it appeared to be just another ordinary house without any signage. However, this particular place had appeared in the middle of the main story of the game, and it was a hidden shop known only to a select few. As soon as he entered the dusty room, he encountered a suspicious and ominous-looking old woman who greeted him with a sinister look on her face. Though Jin seemed completely unfazed by her unsettling behavior and offered his greeting calmly, the old woman appeared quite amazed by his guts, commending that he was only the second person she had met who wasn't startled by her. However, she couldn't comprehend why Jin was giggling at her face. Meanwhile, Jin casually glanced at the surroundings, amazed at the impressive selection of hidden items. When the lady questioned him about his strange behavior, Jin countered her with another question, asking how long she intended to keep up her suspicious old lady act. The old woman was completely taken aback by Jin's remark and inquired in a stuttering tone what he meant by that, commenting she obviously looked like an old lady from every angle possible. However, Jin confidently revealed that he could see right through her disguise, including her long years. Not being able to tolerate his sharp insight any longer, the old lady transformed into a stunning woman with elegant elf ears and striking long hair. Disoriented and confused, she inquired how he had managed to figure that out, further remarking that she was still young and certainly not an old lady. Upon being questioned by Jin, she revealed that she thought an old lady appearance would suit her better for a suspicious-looking shop like hers. Moreover, she expressed rejection because people didn't usually pay much attention to her shop, and most of her rare customers were adults. However, setting her whining aside, she extended her hand and inquired for Jin's name. Introducing herself as Cynthia, Jin also provided his name and shook her hand delightedly. Cynthia observed his attire and remarked that he seemed like a noble or a well-bred young master, further inquiring if he had come there to buy weapons. In response, Jennifer added that he didn't have much money on him. Cynthia informed him that hers was a high-end shop, and when Jin displayed his 2 gold coins, stating it was all he could spend, she plainly told him he couldn't buy anything with such a little amount. With a hint of hope, Jin informed her that he had just left home the previous day and was still preparing for his new life. Further requesting her help, Cynthia contemplated for a moment and immediately told him she would consider his plea if he could help her with a small errand. Without a second thought, Jin agreed, and Cynthia immediately tossed a silver coin towards him, asking if he could buy some flowers fitting for her shop. Shortly after, Jin ventured into the bustling market, searching for the requested flowers, all while thinking that such an event hadn't appeared in any quest log he remembered from the game. On another corner of the market, a little rabbit girl was walking the streets, selling her flowers when she accidentally bumped into a man and tumbled to the ground. The man angrily scolded the girl to watch where she was heading, and then showed her a fresh scratch on his gear, which he claimed was caused by her. He then demanded the poor girl pay him 10 gold coins, further suggesting with a suspicious expression that he could hook her up with a job to earn it. Just then, Jin appeared out of nowhere and stepped in front of the bullying man and the trembling girl. He immediately challenged the man, questioning if he was serious about charging 10 gold coins for such shabby gear. The man's threatening gaze snapped to Jin, demanding to know where he wanted to get killed. But Jin remained unfazed and thought to himself that boasting with such beginner gear only revealed the man's weakness. Without a moment's hesitation, Jin's sharp retort cut through the air. The bullying man's face twisted, and he immediately unsheathed his sword, warning that he would make Jin deeply regret his interference. As the man swung his sword, Jin dodged the attack precisely. Further mocking the man's poor aim, this fueled the man's rage, and he once again raised his sword to strike. Jin smoothly evaded the assault yet again, and in a swift move, he launched an effortless punch towards the man's chest, sending him stumbling backward with a grunt. However, Jin didn't stop there. He followed up with another powerful blow, leaving the man to crumple to the ground. Standing in front, the defeated bully, Jin calmly commented that proper gear was truly important in a fight. While the other bystanders burst into cheers for Jin's sudden bravery, Just then, Jin immediately turned to the poor bunny girl, and as he picked up her flowers, he asked how much she was charging for them. The girl hesitantly informed him that one flower was for 3 copper coins. In response, he told her he would take them all for a silver coin. With her eyes widened, the girl reluctantly stated it was far too much for the simple flowers, but Jin offered a warm, reassuring smile and told her not to worry about it. Not long after, Jen returned to the hidden shop and informed Cynthia that he had acquired the flowers as she had commanded, sent the question if he had brought flowers truly suitable for her shop, to which he replied that she should be the judge of their suitability. In an instant, Jen opened his inventory and summoned the flowers. Stunned, the Cynthia washed and immediately inquired the heat. Truly possessed the rare capabilities for a storage skill. Confused by her evident shock, he nonchalantly inquired if possessing such a skill wasn't common, however. She informed him that it was a skill yearned by every single merchant. Cynthia then let out a sigh of relief, a genuine smile replacing her expression as she told him he had passed her subtle test, revealing that she had simply been testing if she could truly trust him. Upon hearing this, Jen was delighted as he was finally getting his much-needed gear sorted. Cynthia immediately asked Jen to wait, while she selected something she believed would suit him perfectly. Meanwhile, Jin contemplated that in the game, players could only access the shop much later around mid-game, so it was reasonable for him to have high hopes for the gear. However, he reminded himself that unexpected events were already unfolding outside the game's original narrative, so he needed to remain careful and not let his guard down. As Jin was engrossed in his thoughts, Cynthia reappeared and promptly suited him up with a stunning set of armor. She informed him that the gears were crafted from lizardman leather, a material officially classified as part of the dragon species. Out of nowhere, without a warning, she casually smacked the armor with a wooden bat, demonstrating its amazing durability as it remained completely intact from the impact. Moreover, she also handed him an impressive sword and a dagger, asking in a mocking manner if he had been planning on facing monsters bare-handed. However, Jin inquired whether it was truly all right for her to be giving him such top-tier equipment, given his low budget. But she calmly assured him that it was fine, adding that she possessed a keen eye for identifying future regular customers. She preferred to display a reassuring smile, commenting on her excellent intuition for people. On the other hand, Jin apologized, stating that he genuinely couldn't afford such high-quality gears, but also admitting he had no reason to decline her generous offer. Moreover, he promised that he would undoubtedly repay this debt someday. However, Cynthia simply took a single gold coin from his hand and stated that it was quite enough for her, leaving him bewildered. Furthermore, she remarked that she was simply glad to see stock that had been gathering dust in her warehouse finally selling. Jen offered his genuine gratitude. All Cynthia inquired how he was feeling after suiting up in those incredible gears, further mentioning that he would quickly adjust to wielding the large weapons. Following this, she offered him to check out some other items, ensuring him she could provide a good deal. Jen once again inquired if she was truly okay giving him all these services right after their first meeting. She reassured him, stating it was her shop after all, and mentioned her intuition was strongly telling her that investing in him was an excellent call. Jin further contemplated that similar rare service moments had occurred even back in the game, and he was on the verge of accomplishing something significant himself. However, he pushed those thoughts aside and decided to give it a shot when Cynthia was insisting so much. Jin then explored the store, all while thinking that the place seemed reminiscent of the game, yet it was not quite the same world. If events had played out exactly as in the game, Jin likely would not have even gotten out of the House of Largenia in the first place. As he searched the area, his gaze fell upon a mysterious candy bottle, prompting him to inquire about its nature just in the air. She informed him they were candy-shaped mana recovery potions, a revelation that caused Jin's eyes to widen in shock. Mana candy was the strongest healing item that appeared in the late game, offering a sustained recovery effect for a certain period, making it an essential item in prolonged magic battles. He quickly inquired about its price, and she disclosed that she was only charging 1 silver coin for 10 pieces. That revelation left Jen stunned at how incredibly cheap the man of candies were. Seeing his bewildered expression sent the question if it was truly that surprising for him, mentioning that she made them herself as a hobby and supposedly couldn't charge too much for them. With a serious expression on his face, Jin then inquired how much she would charge for every candy bottle in her store. There were exactly 10 pieces over the counter, so she decided to charge half the price, demanding 5 silver coins for everything. Upon hearing her, Jen was delighted and immediately decided to purchase them. After acquiring the mana candice, Jin's happiness knew no bounds as they performed identically to their game counterparts. With these, he could cast magic almost effortlessly. Upon seeing his reaction, Cynthia remarked that she had thought he possessed a more mature vibe. Yet here he was, eyes sparkling over Mayor Candy. She further called him a truly fascinating person, In response, he clarified that while he certainly liked the candy, he was more interested in the candy's unique effect. Puzzled by his remark, she mentioned that the role of those candies was simply to recover mana over time, further stating that ordinary mana recovery potions offered a greater instant recovery amount than the candies. To this, Jin explained that although a higher immediate recovery amount was useful, the mana candies were far more efficient for general use. As Cynthia still seemed perplexed, Jin described that when someone used magic, they were mostly casting simple spells with small non-savannah. So instead of popping open a potion to recover that little bit of mana, it was much more efficient to simply keep licking these candies. This method would save them the hassle of constantly opening and drinking potions, and additionally, it would allow them to keep fighting in magic battles without any hindrance to their casting flow. Cynthia now seemed to grasp the full picture of Jin's sight, though she claimed he didn't need all 10 potions right away. In response, Jin remarked that preparedness was the key to avoiding any regrets in the future. He further told her that the candies were definitely more useful and real combat than traditional recovery potions, so he would keep returning to buy more, requesting her to produce as many as she possibly could. Cynthia assured him she would continue pursuing her hobby if he promised to remain a steady customer for her mana candy. Furthermore, she inquired if he needed anything else, but he expressed his deep gratitude, responding that the armor, weapons, and those candies would be more than enough for the day. He believed that with those supplies he could finally begin his journey as a real adventure, assuring her he would make sure to properly equip himself in the future. Moreover, she stated that it was easy to lose track of him with his unusual vibe, who was a fresh rookie adventurer who had just registered. She chuckled at him, remarking it was the first time she had offered such extensive services to a newly registered adventurer. She added that she believed he would catch up to the top adventures in no time, and that her intuition was usually spot on. With their little exchange concluded, Jin left the store and bid her farewell. As time wore on, Jin was walking down the streets when a mysterious figure lurking in a dark alley called out to him. Upon closer inspection, Jin recognized the bully he had previously defeated. Seething with anger, the bully screeched that he had been searching for Jin for quite some time, promising to wipe that smirk off his face as payback for humiliating him in the street. Without further explanation, he bolted towards Jin and struck hard with his newly acquired sword. Jin easily dodged the attack and a smirk played on his lips as he commented on the bully's improved gear. The man's anger flared at this and he threatened Jin that he would definitely beat him up. Seeing a perfect opportunity to test his new manic Andy, Jin casually sleet one into his mouth, declaring he would face the man head-on. The bully swung his sword with all his might, but Jin, enhanced by his magic skill, dodged the attack effortlessly. He then combined his sword technique with his fire magic, unleashing the power of blessing of the sword god. Jin was amazed upon seeing the power of his strength, a direct result of the mana candy and his newly acquired equipment. With the help of his man of candies, his magic was regenerating at a faster pace. The bully's patience wore thin, as Jin continued to evade all his attacks with precision. He attempted to pounce at Jin with his sword once again, but Jin accurately struck at him with his fire sword, leaving the man's gear burning with fire. Infuriated, the man complained that he will never forgive him for what he had done. The bully attempted one final desperate lunge, but Jin sharply stepped aside and jabbed him in the side with his sword's hilt, sending him collapsing to the ground in defeat. The mana candy and the sword had exceeded Jin's expectations, and he felt a surge of gratitude towards Cynthia. However, reality soon came crashing down as his stomach growled loudly, reminding him that he hadn't eaten anything all day. As Jin shrieked further, he realized he hadn't yet decided on a place to stay, so he resolved to find a place with good food. There are a few ends in the game, and finding one that was both affordable and well-equipped was a challenge. He thought to himself that he would be more than delighted the inn had delicious food and a warm shower. Not long after, when Jin stood before the Fire Dragon Inn, he noted that it was the only inn that met all his needs, though a particular issue lingered in his mind. Soon after, Jin entered the inn, exclaiming loudly and asking for the owner. However, he was immediately silenced by a significantly older male, who told him in a stern voice that he could hear him perfectly well without all the shouting. Chapter 4. Jin chuckled softly at the innkeeper's behavior, recalling that this man, known as Ricardo, was indeed the source of the thrill in the game. Ricardo furiously instructed him not to laugh in his face. Jin then informed him that his inn possessed top-notch facilities in food, though he had heard the only downside was the notoriously grumpy owner. To this remark, Ricardo responded that Jin was precisely on the mark, further stating he would throw Jin out if he was just there to cause trouble. But Jin informed him that he planned on staying there for a while, inquiring if any rooms were available. Fortunately, Ricardo told him they had plenty of rooms, further instructing him to pick whichever he liked. Jin chose a corner room for 10 days and Ricardo allowed him to stay on the second floor. When he further inquired about the meal courses, Jin told him he would like to have breakfast and dinner only. Just then, Ricardo disclosed that the night's meal was a hearty stew made with boar tenderloin. And as soon as Jin heard that, his eyes sparkled with excitement as he contemplated that if this world was truly like the game, then the food must be utterly incredible. He was very eager to try the boar tenderloin. Not long after, the delicious meal was displayed in front of Jin, who stared at it with eager anticipation. Jin took the cutlery and carefully cut into the tender boar meat. He then placed the meat inside his mouth, and as soon as he took his first bite, he was utterly astonished by the exotic taste, finding it 10 times better than he had ever imagined. He then took a sip from his drink, noting that the honey mead was a bit sweet, but it paired perfectly with the rich food. Ricardo explained that they often mixed honey mead with various spices in that region, frequently using it as a substitute for medicine. Moreover, Ricardo observed that Jin seemed a bit worn out, suggesting the meal was an extreme necessity for a young boy like him. Jin, however, called him Baldy and asked him not to address him as a kid, then expressed his gratitude with a delighted smile, mentioning he was truly happy to have spent all his money on the end. Upon hearing this, Ricardo blushed slightly. As soon as Jin caught sight of it, he remarked mockingly that even a bald man's scary face could sometimes blush. Abruptly, Ricardo instructed him to stop, telling him not to point out his insecurities. Setting aside their little conversation, Ricardo inquired if Jin was short on cash, expressing that he believed Jin was a wealthy adventurer since he had paid for 10 days of front. In response, Jin mentioned that a secure place to stay was crucial for adventurers like him, and moreover, there probably wasn't a better end than this one, so he wanted to secure a base. Additionally, Jin remarked that he wouldn't find such delicious boar meat anywhere else. Ricardo simply told him he wouldn't say anything if Jin was content. Just then, Ricardo, observing Jin's confidence and distinguished attire, asked if Jin would be willing to take on one of his personal requests. Jin paused for a moment before explaining that it would depend on the nature of the request, stating he didn't want to stand out too much. Jin was reluctant to draw any unnecessary attention that might lead him back towards his predicted dark path. However, Ricardo assured him that it wasn't a grand request, merely asking Jin to hunt wars for him. He explained that boar meat had been scarce in the market recently, and his stock was running low. Moreover, he was just about to request the Adventurers Guild for boar hunting assistance before Jin's arrival. Jin pondered for a moment before agreeing that hunting a wild boar wasn't too difficult for him, and it wouldn't attract much unwanted attention either. The scene smoothly transitioned to the next day, with Jin now standing at the edge of the forest just outside the capital. He had chosen this location specifically because he wouldn't be noticed by others here, and the wild boar's habitat lay deeper within the forest. Although it was just computer-generated images, Jin couldn't help but marvel at the stunning beauty of the natural scenery. Immediately, Jin composed himself so as not to get too caught up in his feelings. Even though his first request wasn't officially through the guild, he was determined to execute it flawlessly. Jin then paused at the force entrance, assembling his mana throughout his body as he activated his skill. Magic detection to pinpoint any wild boars in the area. It didn't take him long to locate them, as they were closer than you had expected. As he rushed towards their position, he activated his wind-enhanced magic, summoning a magic circle around his hand. With a swift command, a huge wave of wind hurled towards the boars, and in an instant it sliced their heads cleanly in half. With this, Jin's hunting request was complete, and he was glad he had managed to hunt before it got too late. However, a much bigger threat suddenly loomed over him as a giant crimson bear rushed from behind, catching Jin completely off guard with his ferocious attack. As Jin readied himself, he pondered whether the scent of the boar's blue had attracted this beast. Just as Jin struck with his sword, his attack was countered by another bear, which had just joined the battle. As these two ferocious bears loomed over him, Jin wondered if they were a pair. While hunting wasn't typically a significant challenge for Jin, he couldn't comprehend why this encounter felt a little off. The bears then rushed forward, attacking him in unity, and Jin immediately readied his sword as he pondered that every being here was truly alive, unlike the game world. Moreover, he realized that if he allowed these dangerous creatures to escape, someone else might tragically fall prey to them. Without any hesitation, Jin dashed forward, and with a precise, swift strike, he slashed the boar's heads in half, entirely unaware that their little babies were hiding just around the corner. The innocent cubs slowly emerged, walking towards the severed heads of their parents. Jin couldn't help but feel a hint of remorse for them. Shortly after, Jin stood at a secluded corner of the forest, attempting to roast and eat the meat of those defeated bears. He pondered that he hadn't had time for such reflection when he had defeated the lesser dragon, however. he realized that he had taken a life, even if it was that of a monster. He further contemplated that the breath of monster and the warmth of its blood were nothing like the game. Here, every creature was truly fighting for its life. He tried to honor them by eating the roasted meat, but the smell after roasting them was so overwhelmingly strong that he simply couldn't bring himself to consume it. Therefore, he decided to dump the rest of the meat inside his inventory, resolving to get it properly cooked at the Fire Dragon Inlet. Later, in the end, he allowed the cubs to escape, believing this act wouldn't lead him down the path of darkness. Moreover, Jin thought to himself that if they were to die from another cause, there wasn't much he could do in the first place, as this world was clearly not as simple as the game. Out of the blue, a woman's voice emerged from behind him, questioning if Jin wasn't the same boy from before. When Jin inspected closer, it turned out to be none other than Elsa from the guild house. Upon seeing him eating what she recognized as her favorite crimson bear's meat, she inquired if he would be willing to share a bit of it with her. Confused, Jin questioned if rabbit people weren't herbivores, to which Elsa playfully disclosed they ate meat too. As all the sap aside Jin, she sprinkled some special herbs over the meat, explaining that it would eliminate the gamey taste of roasted crimson bear. Jen realized that there was so much about this world he had never grasped, from the specific cooking methods for crimson bears to how rabbit folk consumed meat. Immediately, a truth settled within him that relying solely on game knowledge would no longer guarantee his survival. While Jim was engrossed in such thoughts, Elsa inquired what had him looking like a lost child, which caught him off guard as he questioned his expression truly appeared that awful to her. Just then, Jin presented a hypothetical situation, asking if there existed a scroll detailing the laws of the world. How would she use it to her benefit? Elsa seemed quite intrigued by his question and countered with another inquiry. What was so fascinating about a way of life dictated entirely by such laws? She then proceeded to mention that what she found truly interesting was how it all related back to him. She further stated her belief that he possessed such a scroll or something of that sort which had him struggling, and that was precisely what intrigued her. Though Jin had initially perceived Elsa as an easygoing person, he now understood she was definitely not ordinary. In a composed manner, he responded that he had merely presented a hypothetical example and nothing more. To this, Elsa mentioned she was not the least bit interested even if such a thing existed. Moreover, she gave him a piece of advice, not to go spinning wild tales about it to anyone else. However, she agreed to share her thoughts, further remarking in a teasing manner that he was so adorable she could gobble him up. After that, she mentioned that a scroll detailing the laws of the world would be like a cursed scroll to her, a curse that robbed adventurers of their essential curiosity. She clarified further, stating that even if that scroll had the Crimson Bear's staffs written on it, they wouldn't truly know how it tasted until they tried it for themselves. In other words, it was a curse that made someone think they understood everything about the Crimson Bear just because they knew about its stats. And if that was the extent of their knowledge, then they would be failing as an adventurer. She then posed a question, asking if there was any other way to utilize Crimson Bear meat. However, she proceeded to answer herself, explaining that they could attract other monsters by simply combining the meat with specific herbs. The moment she completed her sentence, a gigantic dragon flew right above their heads, and at that precise moment, she remarked that curiosity truly ignites the spirit of adventure. As she began to walk towards the large beast, Elsa assured Jin to just sit back and watch her handle her prey, stating it was a fast one and had already taken a lot of time to catch. Additionally, she revealed that the herb-roasted Crimson Bear was a favorite dish of dragons, though Jin wasn't too surprised by this revelation given Elsa's cunning nature. He thought to himself that learning monsters with the smell of roasted meat was a tactic he wouldn't find in his game knowledge, solidifying his thought that losing curiosity was indeed a curse. Without wasting another moment, Elsa readied herself and pounced on the huge creature with her sword, promptly striking the dragon and causing it to bleed. However, she received the wrong signal as the dragon immediately got back to its feet, catching her off guard. However, Jin didn't hesitate. He rushed towards the dragon, and with a clean, precise attack, he defeated the massive creature instantly. Seeing his bravery, Elsa praised his skills, and he told her he just wanted to check his sword's capabilities against a dragon. Besides, he stated that Elsa was more than capable of handling anything herself. Jin's expression became determined as he realized he needed to immerse himself deeper into this world, as unexpected events could happen at any time, and relying solely on his raw strength would only lead to limits. To truly avoid a dark path, Jin needed to stop being bound by mere game knowledge. He decided to begin by actively connecting the dots from unexpected encounters and events for his continued survival. Seeing his reaction, Alda stated that he seemed to have sorted out his problems. She remarked that adventures were a bundle of fiery curiosity, adding that she would decide her own path and all the responsibilities that came with it were hers alone. Just then, she lightly pressed her lips on his cheek before bidding him farewell, mentioning it was her way of expression, her gratitude. With that concluded, Jin decided to head home and report back about his first request. A while later, Jin reached the inn and Ricardo told him he had almost missed his dinner because it is later rivaled. However, upon seeing Jin's expression, Ricardo inquired whether something significant had happened to him, noting that Jin suddenly seemed like a real adventure. To this question, Jin declined to elaborate, instead telling him about the request, that he would be renting a storage unit as he had a lot to carry with him. As Jin was summoning the dead boars from his inventory, Ricardo was utterly astonished upon seeing him use storage magic. Additionally, Jin informed him that whatever he stored in his inventory stayed fresh since time stopped inside it. But Ricardo was simply amazed to see that Jin possessed such a rare skill at all. Furthermore, he inquired why Jin was still broke despite possessing such a valuable skill, to which Jin simply responded that it was a long story. Ricardo pointed at the corpses of the boars, stating that each one was taken down the precision. In response, Jin explained that they went down with just a single wind spell, and most of them might not have even realized they were dead. Upon hearing him, Ricardo stated he would have understood as such a feat came from a high-tier mage. But it wasn't something a rookie like Jin should be capable of doing. Ricardo pressured further, questioning what kind of life Jin had been living up until now. But Jin refused to reveal, stating that digging into an adventurer's personal life was a definitive no-go. Just then, Ricardo handed him a pouch filled with coins as compensation for fulfilling his request. Though a simple request, that particular task had been challenging in more ways than one according to Jin. Right at that moment, Jin summoned his inventory portal again and pulled out another slab of meat. And as soon as Ricardo's eyes fell upon it, he was astonished to realize it was meat from a crimson bear. Jin explained he had tried cooking it himself earlier in the day, but its strong odor prevented him from consuming it. He added that he ended up having a rabbit chef cook it for him instead. Upon hearing this, Ricardo immediately questioned that he was talking about Elsa, and when Jin confirmed it, Ricardo understood Jin had indeed tasted the legendary herb-roasted meat. Furthermore, he called Jin lucky for consuming it, stating that rabbit folk were experts with herbs, and in particular, Elsa possessed insane knowledge in that field. Moreover, he turned to Jin and mentioned that though Elsa seemed frivolous, her skills were undeniably top-notch. After this, Ricardo took the slab of meat and promised to make Jin a dish that would rival Elsa's herb-roasted masterpiece. Just then, Ricardo was shown tossing the crimson bear meat into a sizzling pan, adding vivid spices and rich sauces to create the ultimate dish. Soon, the special braised crimson bear and red wine was presented in front of Jin, who seemed extremely intrigued by the meat's exquisite appearance. Jin couldn't help but comment that Ricardo whipped up very delicate dishes, a talent that entirely mismatched his face. As soon as Jin took his first bite, he found it so overwhelmingly delicious that words failed him. Ricardo further stated that such a luxurious dish deserved a fine fruit wine, and even offered to join him in a toast. Meanwhile, across town, the guild house, Fine thanked Elsa for her work on the Wavering and praised her amazing skill. Elsa simply noted that their success was all thanks to that young boy, which left Fine a little confused. Elsa then inquired if Fine had secured approval for partner registration. Fine affirmed, and with a hopeful expression, she asked if Elsa was finally registering a partner for herself, but Elsa responded that she was better off solo. Moreover, she told Fine she had a feeling a Prince Charming might be coming for Fine, adding that it was all part of the boundless curiosity of adventurers. The following day, Jenner died at the guild house and greeted Fine, who promptly inquired if he was ready for a request. However, Jin clarified that he was there to register himself with a guild receptionist as a partner. Registering a guild receptionist as a partner brought significant benefits to adventurers, primarily because the partnered receptionist would prioritize their requests. In return, the guild would take a cut of the adventurer's rewards. In this game world, the guild actively scouted adventurers who were beginning to shine and distinguish themselves. Fine mentioned that there wasn't any specific problem with such a contract, but she hadn't heard of any beginners registering a partner before. Yet, Jin reassured her that if she was worried about him, she shouldn't be, as he possessed ample money and had immense confidence in his skills. Moreover, he believed he could contribute significantly to the guild. Fine explained that Jin could nominate someone to be his partner, further asking if there was any receptionist he wished to partner with and clarifying that if the receptionist already had a partner, they would suggest someone else. Jin inquired whether Fine had any partner yet, but she denied it, telling him she had just received contract approval the other day. To her surprise, Jin then revealed that he wanted Fine to be his partner, stating that he had been in her care since the moment he registered as an adventurer. Fine remained done for a moment, but then immediately rushed to repair the contract, remarking she would do it if it was all right with him. Jin was satisfied as this partnership would now grant him access to requests that would normally be beyond his reach. Out of the blue, a man with a hoarse voice called out, interrogating Jin about whether he was truly signing a partner contract with Fine, or if he had simply misheard such crap. When Jen confirmed it, the man shook his head in disbelief and mentioned that this was precisely why he disliked kids like Jen. Furthermore, the man's face twisted in fury as he complained that it would also be a hassle for Fine. They failed the quest because of him. He explained that Fine was kind enough to deal with a kid like him, but he disclosed that it truly annoyed him to see someone who didn't even know their own skills and capabilities pretending to be an adventure. In the heat of the moment, the man barked that he had had his eyes on Fine for a long time before swinging his fist in a fit of rage. However, as cunning as ever, Jin stepped aside effortlessly and planted his foot in the middle of the man's path, causing him to trip and fall flat on his face. Has the manly defeated? Jen remarked that only Fine had genuinely cared about him when he was just a newbie, and he knew best just how kind Fine truly was. He further shrieked, stating there was no way he would make Fine cry, especially someone who cared so much for adventures. He declared that he would make Fine absolutely happy as his partner. But the man didn't argue further and merely demanded Jin to step back. However, as Jin glanced back, he flushed at the sight of Fine, along with Elsa, standing right behind him. Elsa seized the opportunity and taunted Jin about his claims, asking if Jin was truly going to make her happy, while Fine couldn't help but blush uncontrollably. Not long after the heated argument, Jen and Fine stood side by side, extending their hands in front of a mystical book, and forming a partner contract in a way Jen had never known before. In the game, it had simply been a pop-up declaring the establishment of their contract. But here there was a full ceremonial procedure to vow their partnership and promise to always help each other out. With the procedure complete, both Jin and Fine were delighted and looked forward to working with each other. In the midst of their conversation, Elsa entered the area and inquired if she was interrupting them in any way. But Fine assured her that she wasn't. Upon asking, Elsa revealed that everyone was itching for an excuse to drink, and that all they were eagerly waiting for the oath ceremony to end. After the establishment of their contract, they all raised their toasts and cheered. Meanwhile, Jen told Fine that as partners he wanted her to know everything about him right away. Immediately, he activated his status window and displayed all his formidable stats, silently thanking the Boars and Crimson Bears for enhancing his abilities to such a significant level. He wondered if this rapid growth was perhaps a consequence of his unique abilities' inherent growth enhancement. However, upon seeing his incredible stats, Fine immediately inquired about his true identity. Jin disclosed that until a few days ago, he was merely a noble child, but now that he had escaped the mansion, he considered himself an ordinary person. But Fine, with a resolute expression, claimed there was no way an ordinary person could possess such amazing stats. Additionally, she mentioned that just by looking at his level, he was nearly on par with a silver-class adventurer. The breakdown of ranks was much like a game system. This world's class system being divided into 6 ranks: Platinum, Gold, Silver, Bronze, Iron, and Wood. Platinum was the highest rank, yet Jin was still technically at Wood rank. Fine remarked that with his stats this high, he should be perfectly capable of handling even monster extermination quests and could tackle almost any request. Moreover, she inquired if Jin had any weaknesses, to which he revealed he was inexperienced in one-on-one battles. Upon hearing him, she mentioned that it was inevitable as he was just 12 years old, wondering how he could possibly train in one-on-one combat. Right at that moment, the very man Jin had previously defeated inquired if Jin would fancy some one-on-one combat training with him. He reminded Jen that he still owed him for the earlier humiliation, promising that he'd go easy on him. Fine immediately intervened, mentioning that fighting was strictly forbidden within guild premises, but the man quickly assured her it would be just for fun, and they would simply borrow a room in the back. Jin also found himself quite intrigued by the offer because a secluded space meant he wouldn't draw unwanted attention. With this being settled, Jin issued a subtle warning to the man that he wouldn't be going easy on him either. Subsequently, in a distant deserted corner of the guild house, both Jin and the man stood facing opposite to each other. In a mocking tone, the man commented that it was a good thing they were fighting in a secluded area where no one could see, so Jin wouldn't embarrass himself if he lost. To this, Jin retorted back in the same plethora. The man explained their rules. After 3 steps from their places, they would turn and begin the fight. But he caught Jin off guard when he cunningly turned and attacked Jin at the 2nd step. As Jin struggled to keep his footing, the man exclaimed the first tip of one-on-one combat that people could always be underhanded. Jin immediately countered the attack, all while thinking that he absolutely couldn't lose on the day he had signed a partnership with Fine. As the man kept striking relentlessly, he mentioned Jin possessed solid skills to even be able to parry with him. Immediately, Jin slightly stepped backward and then lunged at the man, striking his sword and jerking it away from him, as the man knew he was already defeated. He bowed before Jin without hesitation and apologized for messing with him, which utterly perplexed Jin. Though Jin was unaware of a sneaky move, the man still kept up his sleeve. With a quick snap of his fingers, the man flashed Jin using his magic, causing Jin's vision to blur right that moment. As Jin remained astonished by the man's possession of magic skills, the man displayed a cunning smirk and remarked that he had never mentioned they would be fighting with just swords. The man then offered Jin a second tip to never simply believe an opponent, for people often tend to lie. Nevertheless, Jin's blurred vision began to clear, and he wasted no time activating his abnormality-resistant skill. The man offered one more piece of advice, that he should never let his guard down in front of an opponent, then casually revealing he was actually a bronze-ranked adventurer. Without wasting a moment, Jin activated his god blessing and magic power boost, simultaneously, and swiftly regained his composure to face the man. However, his eyes widened in astonishment as he saw Fine standing right behind the man, clutching a frying pan and practically fuming with anger. Noticing Jin's sudden and unusual reaction, the man instinctively turned his head, only to be heavily smacked by the pan with a clang. Still seething, Fine reminded them both that fighting in the guild was strictly prohibited. Meanwhile, looking on with amusement, Elsa simply told Jin that he had acquired himself a truly handy partner indeed. At that moment, Jin realized he shouldn't be messing with Fine at any cost. As the hours rolled by, back at the reception, Fine asked whether Jin was planning to go solo from then on. Jin responded that he would like to have companions, as it brought in the range of requests he could undertake. Additionally, he believed that sharpening each other's skills was the very essence of a good adventure story. Upon hearing him, Fine mentioned she hadn't anticipated him to be interested in that sort of dynamic, but Jin further explained that he liked her very much, precisely for her insights into adventure quests. Then, the scene transitioned to a completely different area, where Jin stood on rugged terrain ready to hunt some works. The benefits of a partnership contract were truly significant, as Jin remained surprised by how he was now offered such high-value requests despite the risks. He scanned his surroundings, recognizing he was finally in work territory. However, he was struggling, startled upon discovering fresh bloodstains on a nearby rock. He initially wondered if another adventurer had fought orcs here, but then immediately remembered Fine had specifically told him no one else had ventured this way. A jolt of panic hit him, knowing the scent of blue would inevitably attract other monsters. Out of the blue, large, terrifying orcs lurked right behind him, catching him off guard. Yet he didn't seem particularly terrified. Instead, he felt the surge of readiness as he wanted to dispatch these monsters immediately and wrap up his urgent business. With a swift motion of his hand, he activated his fire magic and lashed out towards the monstrous figures, slicing each and every one of them with precision. As the works fell dead, he immediately activated his storage magic and neatly dumped their corpses away. Without wasting another moment, he was still alive. He rushed to activate his magic detection skill. Soon after, he detected the presence of various individuals rushing towards his direction. Jin pondered whether they were adventurers or if they were running from something, as no other monster's presence was detected in the area. On another corner, he noticed a lone figure seemingly fighting crimson bears, their magic visibly weakening. Jin immediately realized that the blue he found earlier must have belonged to that adventure, so he instantly dashed towards them to offer aid. Without any hesitation, Jin activated his wind magic and used it to boost his speed and immediately reach the troubled adventurer. On the other hand, a poor girl named Kloe was shown desperately running for her life from those ferocious crimson bears. Though she attempted to attack the monsters, her efforts proved futile as the bears used their sharp claws to tumble her over to the ground. As Kloe lay defeated in front of those terrifying creatures, they bared their sharp fangs ready to strike. But just as they lunged towards her, Jin arrived precisely on time and effortlessly slashed the monsters' heads in half. Immediately after defeating those crimson bears, Jin turned around and faced Kloe, a warm smile gracing his lips as he remarked that he was glad he arrived just in time. Jin promptly put the monstrous corpses inside his storage inventory, and then offered his helping hand to Kloe. She was visibly flustered, but Jen continued to help her stand, further questioning what she was doing fighting those monsters alone in that dangerous area. Kloe disclosed that her teammates had cruelly used her as bait to escape from the creatures. Jin immediately wondered if they were the same adventurers he had detected earlier with his magic detection skill. He felt the surge of annoyance at their audacity and remarked that deception was the biggest offense in an adventurer's code. Furthermore, Kloe trembled in fear as she explained she had been terrified by the chase and immediately realized she was doomed when she stumbled into work territory. However, Jin assured her in a gentle tone, urging her to relax now that she was safely in his care. Kloe didn't waste any time expressing her deep gratitude for his timely intervention. He provided further assistance, taking her to a nearby tree and offering to help treat her wounds. He then carefully applied the medicine, reassuring her that her injuries would heal soon. She felt bad and apologized for making him use such expensive medicine on her. But Jin cheered her up, explaining that a kind elf had sold him that medication at a discount for emergency, all while silently thanking Cynthia. Kloe couldn't help but mention that he was such a mysterious person, given that he had an elf friend and had even effortlessly taken down the monsters single-handedly. Jen was honored by her praises. He then extended his hand, offering his introduction, and Kloe also delightedly shook his hand and revealed her name. He then suggested they take a short rest before heading back to the guild to report about those unfaithful individuals who had deceived Kloe and used her as bait. Back at the guild house reception, the adventurers who had abandoned Kloe were involved in a heated argument with Fine, explaining that Kloe was the one who had freaked out and run off alone, leaving them behind. They bitterly complained about the hassle of cleaning up after her supposed mess. However, they were caught utterly off guard when Kloe intervened out of nowhere, voice surprisingly calm as she asked whom they were talking about. Startled by her sudden appearance, the group members immediately composed themselves and quickly pretended to concern for her. They inquired if she was okay, mentioning how worried they had been about her. Seizing the moment, one of the members instantly whispered to her, commanding her not to spill the beans as they were about to go for their bronze rank promotion. Moreover, they reassured her that they would welcome her back into the party if she would just try to grow mature. Out of nowhere, Jin interjected and protested loudly that they had deliberately used Kloe as bait to escape the Crimson Bears. Immediately, those members turned on Jin, criticizing him to stop spouting such nonsense. Another member, Agar Shivli, intervened, complaining there was no way someone like Jin could fight a Crimson Bear solo and return unscathed, further demanding he produced proof. Without losing any more time, Jin presented the corpses of the Crimson Bears, summoning them directly from his inventory. Upon seeing this undeniable evidence, Fine immediately pulled out her weapon, her trusty frying pan, incited the severe consequences of their act that their adventurer status would be revoked. They would face a 1-year ban on re-registration. They would be forced to serve half a year as guild errand runners, and a significant portion of the party's assets would also be transferred directly to Kloe. When the members attempted to object against Fine's decision, the terrifying aura emerging from her immediately silenced them. Furthermore, she then bowed deeply to Kloe and apologized on behalf of the guild's lack of proper investigation, and for unintentionally placing her in such grave danger. Still flustered, Kloe explained it was perhaps her own fault in the first place for trusting those people, even after sensing their cunning nature. She then turned to Jin and remarked that something far worse could have happened to her if he hadn't arrived on time. However, Jin simply asked her not to worry about such matters, stating that he was just doing his job. Just then, Jen inquired if he could not report on the request. However, Fine was clearly amazed he had not only completed the task, but also managed to save someone's life. As he continued to produce more boar and Crimson Bear corpses from his inventory, he humbly claimed it wasn't a difficult request for him at all, calling the Crimson Bear encounter just a mere side quest. Kloe then subtly leaned towards Fine, sneakily asking if Jin's skills surpassed the silver class. Fine responded that she wasn't entirely sure, but he would likely be silver class or even higher. Fine then suggested to Jin that he would level up in no time if he found himself good teammates. All Kloe, her eyes sparkling with excitement, eagerly inquired whether he was looking for partners. In response, Jin simply remarked that soul play had its limits, and that growing alongside friends was a part of the fun experience for adventurers. With amusement, Kloe mentioned that she had always felt that way too, disclosing that when she was little, she read adventure tales and dreamed of having her own companions. As Jin looked at her with admiration, he commented that they should embark on a fun adventure together. Fine then added that with close profile, she fit exactly what he required, and he immediately mentioned there was no issue from his side if Fine improved. With a hint of hope in her voice, Kloe inquired if he really was okay having someone like her as his partner. But Jin reassured her with a warm smile that she was a perfect candidate. After they officially partnered, Kloe inquired if Jin was fine with her taking the lead. He asked if Kloe possessed frontline combat skills, to which she elaborated that she had Bodhi enhancement magic and swordsmanship level 3. With these two skills, she was confident she could manage to hold her ground, just as she had been doing so far. Just then, Fine added and disclosed that the guild rated Kloe's best skill as reconnaissance, further informing them that she had the perfect quest in mind for their new duo. The next day at the Fire Dragon Tavern, Jen arrived and greeted Ricardo, who promptly informed Jen that he already had a guest. Additionally, Ricardo mentioned that he had prepared breakfast to avoid keeping Jin waiting. In a teasing manner, Jin thanked him, adding that he never would have guessed such thoughtfulness from Ricarda's tough exterior. Though a little annoyed, Ricarda assured Jin that he would cover his guest breakfast tab. Soon after, Jin entered the room and saw a Kloe sitting right in front of them, who excitedly told him that the inn's breakfast was truly amazing. Jen informed her that she had arrived way too early. But when Kloe inquired whether she was being a nuisance, he responded that he was just worried she would have been waiting longer if he hadn't slept in. Kloe giggled and revealed she simply couldn't sit still, as she was too excited about their first quest together. In response, Jen also showed his excitement, admitting he could hardly sleep thinking about their very first adventure together. A while later, both of them reached the rugged terrain, where Jin stated that they had already confirmed the presence of a high orc in the territory. Kloe confirmed whether they just had to take down that high orc to complete the quest, but he clarified they needed to bring back the materials in as pristine condition as possible. As they ventured further, Jin pondered that her scouting skill might intuitively detect the high orc's position better than his own magic sensing. When he inquired if they were nearby, she planted her sensitive ears onto the ground and suggested they loop downwind and follow the sounds. When he interrogated further, she explained that the sounds were similar to loud footsteps or the rustling of gears. Moreover, she remarked that she would even track the smells and engrave the feelings on her skin to uncover every hidden trace of the high work. He called her skill imperishable and even told her that he couldn't match the unique skills of a beast folk like her. Immediately, Kloe heard something and rushed towards that direction, informing Jin that she sensed the presence of 2 high orcs and 3 regular ones. Jin was stunned that she could pinpoint all of that from such a distance. He now realized why the guild had rated her so highly, because she was definitely superior in terms of detection, even surpassing his own skills in this field. Just then, she cautioned him to stay alert. As she sensed something off about that specific area, it was almost like the traces were begging to be found. Jin contemplated that high orcs were considerably smarter than the regular ones, suspecting they might be attempting to lure them into a trap. He immediately suggested they investigate a bit further before taking any action. They then sprinted ahead and hid in a nearby bush, sneakily observing the orcs from a distance. He mentioned it was just as she had predicted there were 2 high orcs, which he decided to strike down himself with his magic. All Kloe decided to handle the front line. As both of them readied themselves for the fight, Jin immediately recalled his wind skill and attacked the orcs' territory, leaving the monsters momentarily stunned. On the other hand, Kloe dashed forward and engaged the monsters head-on. Jin contemplated that if they got this close to the monsters, his detection should be even more accurate. Without wasting any more time, he activated his magic sensing and detected more orcs of fire, cleverly camouflaged in the mud. Jin then realized why Kloe couldn't spot them with her ordinary sensing, because they were indeed deliberately trying to lure them in. As an orc struck its weapon, Kloe swiftly dodged the attack and immediately pounced on it. However, the orc's strength seemed overwhelmingly superior to Kloe's, as they appeared to be taking the lead in the fight. In the blink of an eye, the monsters lunged at her and swung their swords to strike, but Jin swiftly took on the fight, effortlessly severing their heads using his wind magic. He then proceeded to caution her not to let her guard down so easily when the threat still persisted. Shortly after, a horde of bloodthirsty orcs then threateningly loomed over them, causing Kloe to tremble with fear and her eyes welling up with tears. She couldn't comprehend what she could possibly do in that situation, wanting that she would be used as bait again at this rate. However, Jen calmly reassured her with a genuine smile, encouraging her that she could definitely overcome this. Without warning, the horde of monsters lunged at them, but Jin actively produced a magic circle and swiftly activated a combination of magic enhancement and wind magic, giving Kloe enough time to react and engulfing her sword with his powerful wind magic. Though she hesitated initially, she confidently lashed towards the orcs, swinging her sword fluidly to defeat each and every single one of them. Seeing Kloe unleash your power so uncontrollably, Jin's lip curled into a smile as he gently inquired if she was all right. Her body still trembled, and she thumped over to Jen, stating that if he hadn't held the high orcs back with his magic, they wouldn't have stood a chance against them. She found the act of Jin cleverly casting wind magic into her sword to be utterly amazing, while Jin simply stated that he needed to bring back some quality materials. Additionally, he praised Kloe for her incredible skills. However, she expressed a twisted sorrow as she revealed that she believed she would be left behind again. Deep down, she knew Jin wouldn't do that, but regardless, she apologized to him for thinking such a thought about him. Yet Jin reassured her not to worry about such insignificant matters, mentioning that they were a party after all. Their first quest together was a success, but what mattered even more than the victory was the bond they had formed. Later on, they reached the guild house and reported back to Fine, who appeared very surprised that they had finished their task already. Moreover, Fine reminded them that they had a few days to complete the quest, but she knew only someone like Jin would have the power to finish a quest in a single day. Additionally, Fine pointed out that Kloe's expressions seemed a bit softer, and that she seemed to have overcome her distrust of people. Kloe appeared surprised by the comment, but she didn't deny the fact and gave all credit to Jin. Right at this moment, Jin felt a distinct déjà vu and realized that a very similar exchange had happened before in the game. Immediately, Jin's face twisted into a stark realization that there was indeed a character named Kloe Distrustful in the game, however. This clue was completely different. In the game, she was a dark, scary character with severe distrust of people, and never truly opening up to anyone with her core character setting. Jin broke into cold sweats upon realizing that he was now teaming up with one of the most important characters when he had initially resolved to escape the story himself. Adding to this unsettling realization, he had also partaken in a similar episode with her that very day. Fine them added that they both seemed to possess great synergy, so she believed dungeon crawling would work exceptionally well for them. Close excitement was visible as she quickly explained how she could spot traps while Jin could swiftly defeat the monsters with his magic. Jin agreed, noting their potential as a good match. He knew that dungeon hunting would allow him to adventure without drawing too much unwanted attention. Just then, Fine inquired whether she should start looking for dungeons and recommend suitable ones, to which Jin immediately agreed without a moment's hesitation. Dungeons were places where gods testicumens, and that was precisely how this world found itself filled with so many dungeons. There were dungeons near the royal capital too, and every day countless adventurers bravely challenged these divine trials. While dangerous monsters and numerous traps awaited within, dungeons were almost always featured in grand adventure tales. With genuine dungeon hunting now on horizon, Jen realized they were truly becoming real adventures. While Kloe could barely contain her excitement for the thrilling experience ahead, there were two types of dungeons, unclear and cleared, and the one Fine recommended was the latter. Just like in the game world, dungeons here were randomly generated, changing their layout periodically, rendering the maps largely useless. With permission granted by the gate guard, Jin stepped inside the dungeon as Kloe inquired how far they would be delving that day. In response, he clarified that he planned to explore down to the third layer at first and would venture even deeper if the circumstances feel right. She affirmed, but also reminded him of Fine's suggestion not to push themselves too hard. As Jin proceeded to open the giant gate, he responded that he believed they could conquer the dungeon with their sheer skills, though he also agreed it was wise to heed the advice they'd been given. However, as soon as they entered, Kloe was utterly astonished to encounter a vibrant sun suspended within the dungeon. Jin added to her profound surprise that it wasn't just the sun, but wind and water was also flowing freely, mirroring the external environment. He explained that in some dungeons they might even find a snowy plain right after a volcanic layer, while another layer might reveal a night sky filled with moons. He further elaborated that the true unknown lay within an unclear dungeon, and that was precisely why adventurers like themselves sought to explore its mysteries. Radiating with enthusiasm, Kloe suggested they explore an unclear dungeon together, while he responded with equal determination, confessing he couldn't wait to grow stronger and set out on such grand adventures. However, their spirited conversation was abruptly cut short when she sensed something wrong, quickly informing him of an unknown entity far away. Couldn't help but silently praise her truly impressive scouting skills. Without wasting any further time, he activated his magic detection and encountered various goblins directly ahead, with one even noticing their presence. He immediately informed Kloe of the 3 goblins, noting that one had already spotted them. Additionally, he alerted her about a magic user suddenly sneaking around nearby. He then cautioned her to remain cautious, because even though this was merely the first layer, these monsters were distinctly different from those outside. Jin's lips curled into a confident smirk as he remarked that monsters grew stronger the deeper one ventured into a dungeon, further suggesting they immediately test their skills in the upcoming fight. Moments later, the Dew faced the threat of the beastly goblins head-on, and upon closer inspection, Jin immediately identified one as a goblin mage. With a swift hand gesture, the mage's companions instantly drew their weapons and lashed out towards them. With unwavering confidence, Kloe charged directly into them, while Jin resolved to personally fight the goblin mage. The goblin mage murmured some chants under its breath, summoning fire magic and hurling a bolt directly towards Jin. However, he reacted actively, activating his water attribute magic to erect a shield and weaken the monster's assault. Instantly, he counterattacked with his magic. Gain enough time needed to pounce and deliver a precise strike using his sword. On the other hand, Kloe swiftly concluded her own fight and remarked that the encounter felt surprisingly anticlimactic, yet Jin considered the encounter rather pathetic, stating that even the mage goblin, who was supposedly a higher species, had proven disappointingly weak. But Kloe reminded him they were still merely on the first floor. adding that she sensed it was using its brain just a tad more than the dull monsters outside. Jean affirmed, confirming that it was indeed making some subtle tactical moves. As they continued their brief conversation, unaware that the goblin mage was slowly regained its footing, Jin immediately sensed the fight was not concluded yet. As he inspected closer, his gaze locked onto a magic item. A shimmering necklace coiled around the goblin's neck. As the goblin attacked, they barely managed to sidestep the assault, leaving sharp pebbles to erupt violently from the floor. When Kloe lunged with her sword, the monster swiftly caught it, then retaliated with a blast of fire magic, violently throwing Kloe away. Before they could even catch their breath, the goblin proceeded to chant another spell, producing 2 fireballs of immense size. Panic-stricken, Kloe inquired what their next move should be, but Jin calmly reassured her they could definitely handle this if they only remained composed. As it hurled those twin fireballs towards them, he immediately commanded her to dodge to the side. However, faced with 2 simultaneous deadly threats, she froze, unable to decide which way to move. Acting swiftly, Jin intervened and casted a water magic shield directly in front of them, shielding themselves from the incoming danger. He offered her a gentle smile, suggesting in a soft tone to stay calm and take a deep breath. Additionally, he reassured that he would undoubtedly protect her from anything, no matter the circumstances. Immediately, Jin activated magic-enhanced water attribute magic, then inquired if Kloe felt capable of handling the goblin now. To his relief, she confidently declared that she was perfectly fine. The goblin hurled another fireball, but Jin swiftly cast his water attribute magic, forming a shimmering shield for Kloe, and immediately commanded her to go for it, urging her to give it all she's got. She fluidly and relentlessly swam her sword, finally defeating the goblin monster in an instant. She then hurried towards Jin, confirming the creature wasn't getting up anymore, and added that the dungeon truly left no room for complacency. However, he inquired whether Kloe believed the monsters outside the dungeon were compared to the stronger, to which she affirmed undeniably. Moreover, she admitted she had been a bit tense at first, but now that the fight had concluded, she realized it hadn't been that big of a deal after all. Jin then suggested they merely gauge the strength of the monsters on the first layer before considering a die to the third. Moments later, they ventured deeper into the dungeon's passages. Jin contemplated that if he didn't delve deeper than the third layer right away, his presence wouldn't exactly stand out. As they breezed through to the third layer together, Kloe disappointedly asked if that was truly all the dungeon had to offer. Jin added to her sentiment that the monsters up to the third layer had all proven remarkably weak, further recalling Fine's mention that their numbers significantly increased from the third layer onward. Moreover, Kloe sighed in disbelief, remarking that while she'd been surprised to face an unfamiliar goblin mage at first, now even an increased number of goblins wouldn't make much difference to her. Noting her display's reaction, Jin pondered that she seemed somewhat unsatisfied, given that they effortlessly cleared all the levels. Just then, Jin mentioned that their combined skills seemed more than sufficient for beyond the third layer, further inquiring if Kloe would be comfortable dropping down one more layer. Immediately, her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm as she confessed she had also been considering delving even deeper. However, before Jin could react, a group of unfamiliar adventurers came into view, pleading desperately for help. They disclosed they had managed to reach the fourth layer, only to be instantly attacked by ferocious monsters. Another member of the group then nervously asked if they would be kind enough to share a recovery potion with them. Without a moment's hesitation, Jin offered their supplies, prompting the adventurers to express their deepest gratitude. Before departing, those adventurers warned them to be careful if they were planning to head to the fourth layer, emphasizing it was an entirely different world from the third. Furthermore, with unusual expressions on their faces, they offered prayers for the duo's safety and inquired about their identities. Though Jin seemed hesitant to reveal his name, as he wanted to avoid unnecessary acquaintances and standing out. Without a second thought, Kloe boldly revealed their names to them. Before finally leaving, the adventurers remarked that they would surely report their bravery to the guild. Meanwhile, Kloe eagerly disclosed her excitement to explore the fourth layer, but Jin could only remain silently in disbelief. They opened the gate to the fourth layer, and as soon as they stepped inside, Kloe commented on the distinctly changed scenery of that floor. However, upon seeing a fierce orc directly in front of them, Jin added that it seemed it was not just the scenery that had changed. Shortly after, they defeated the orcs without much effort. Jin commended Kloe, noting she hadn't even given him a chance to jump in, and Kloe for her part was shocked that they had managed to take it down so easily. He simply suggested they keep this momentum intact in front of the upcoming threats. On their way, they encountered various uniquely outs and structures, along with distinctive monsters. Just like that, they went through to the 8th floor, prompting Kloe to inquire whether they were simply too strong, or if the dungeon itself was just weak. In response, Jin mentioned that they must indeed be strong, as that particular dungeon was recommended for silver-ranked adventurers. As they walked further, they reached the imposing entrance of the boss room. Jin questioned if Kloe was entirely ready before opening the massive gate. However, as soon as they swung it open, they found themselves facing a goblin boss, accompanied by its numerous minion goblins. Jin stated that the goblin leader was clearly the boss of the dungeon, while Kloe mentioned there were more goblin than she had anticipated. But he reassured her that they should be fine as long as they watched out for the sheer numbers. Immediately, with a quick snap of the leader's fingers, the horde of nearby goblins lunged at the duo all at once. As Kloe readied herself and proceeded to counter their attack, she realized that these goblins were far more coordinated than the ones on the shallow floors. The goblin leader stared at them, but Jin composed himself and cast wind magic to swiftly dispatch all the goblins moving around Kloe. The mage goblins then pressed numerous fire towards her, but she dodged all of those threats with remarkable ease and killed each and every single one of them. With the numbers of the goblins swiftly declining, the remaining few feared to even stand in front of them. In an unexpected right move, the monster leader grabbed those fearful goblins and immediately began killing them one by one. Jin inquired whether that beast was going mad, as it appeared the leader goblin was absorbing power from other monsters. As the beast now enhanced with newfound power, ticking its feast and attack, Jin successfully dodged and jumped at the beast, commenting that even if it went mad, it was still just a goblin. Without wasting another moment, he swiftly unleashed a fire using his enhanced fire magic, and struck the monster with full devastating force sheet. As the monster stepped to the ground, running fiercely with fire, Kloe couldn't help but marvel at his amazing strength and skills. Confidently demonstrating his power, Jin commented that it was merely a basic fire which anyone could learn. After that, he suggested they go and collect their clear rewards. In the game, clearing a dungeon typically yielded a proof of conquest and random rewards. Kloe was quite happy to see what lay inside the chest, and as soon as Jen opened it, their eyes shimmered at the sight of a skill book for elemental magic. She couldn't contain her happiness, realizing this item was super rare to acquire, while Jin suggested they head back to the guild and celebrate their success. The focus then shifted to the guild house, where Fine simply couldn't believe what she was hearing from the duo. Unable to fully trust them, she again questioned whether they had truly cleared that dungeon in just half a day. Jin responded that it was surprisingly easy and also presented her the proof of quest. With a magnifying glass, she carefully assessed the item, stating that the boss was a goblin leader who could have only been defeated by silver-tier adventurers. She again asked if both of them had defeated it together, but Kloe revealed that it was Jin who had defeated it all alone, leaving it to the end. Fine utterly stunned. Fine then congratulated both of them on successfully clearing the dungeon. However, as soon as they began to leave for their celebration, Fine immediately stopped Jin and inquired if he would spare some time afterwards, leading Jin feeling utterly uneasy. Fine then complained that she wasn't entirely comfortable with his remarkable feats, effectively dumping all of the responsibility on Jin. With a blunt expression, she stated that he stood out a bit too much, having saved Kloe from danger, knocked out requests in a day, and even conquered a dungeon in just half a day. Moreover, she revealed there were reports of him helping people in that dungeon too, and Jin immediately realized she was talking about those adventurers she had encountered back in the dungeon. Fine informed him that the guildmaster was calling for him, prompting him to think that he had indeed stood out far too much to be summoned by the guildmaster herself. In the game, the guildmaster was known for her cool demeanor, but she was surprisingly playful and popular, yet he wasn't even supposed to meet her in the game's original storyline. Unexpectedly, a figure emerged directly behind him, and commented that Jin appeared to be quite younger than she had anticipated. She exchanged leisure greetings and introduced herself as a Shukulus Sector, the guildmaster of the Adventurers Guild in the royal capital. However, Jin didn't have the audacity to turn around and face her head-on. Unconscious of her sudden appearance, he introduced himself as a rookie adventurer, though he was completely unaware of what he should exactly do in that situation. The moment Jin realized that Asuka was not supposed to be in the royal capital at this point in the story, he quickly stated he'd heard she was away on some distant work. Asuka commented with a hint of amusement in her voice that he knew a lot for a mere rookie. She then clarified she'd heard about an intriguing adventurer from Fine, and simply couldn't help but rush back after concluding her duties. She then placed her hands gently on his shoulder, an act that instantly made him uneasy, and suggested they find a quiet spot for a pleasant chat. However, Jin couldn't help but wonder that any involvement with her could inevitably trigger major flags. Considering he was one of the wanted targets in the Holy Sword hero in the 7 Battle Maidens game, Jin attempted to excuse himself, citing that he felt a little unwell, but it was already too late to sleep from the hold of the guildmaster. As Ashoka grasped his hand, drawing him towards her private room, He desperately requested her to simply forget about him after their brief conversation. Meanwhile, Ashika chuckled, remarking that he was rather spewing some strange things which only made her more intrigued. Moments later, they were comfortably seated in a room, where Ashoka asked if he was attempting to avoid her due to his noble status. Jennifer earned all the while, thinking she had indeed conducted her prior research just as he'd expected. Furthermore, she pressed him on where he had acquired such impressive magic and refined swordsmanship, claiming she had never encountered anyone possessing such unique skills. Jin inquired precisely how much she knew about him, but she offered no clear answer, responding within a smile that she might even know everything about him. Jin then revealed that he did possess some natural talent, and that only his deceased mother had ever known his true strength. He had never told this to anyone else. In a teasing manner, she mentioned there was no need for him to reveal all his cards just yet, then promptly moved to sick Laser beside him, stating with genuine interest that she truly had never met someone interesting like him. She affectionately patted his head, but he couldn't help but pleadingly steer towards Fine, silently baying for her help. Fine promptly intervened and placed herself between them, firmly asking Ashoka not to put Gent in such an uncomfortable position. Though Asuka initially attempted to oppose, but she soon submitted as soon as her gaze fell upon Fine's popular frying pan. Jin murmured that Asuka was surprisingly cooperative, only for her to lean in and secretly whisper that Fine became truly scary when angered. Jen couldn't help but agree, knowing Fine's temper all too well himself. Just then, Fine called Ashoka over to finish their leftover work, and Jen silently thanked Fine for intervening and saving him from the guildmaster. The scene shifted to a quiet, deserted terrain where Jen and Kloe were gathering their remaining belongings. As Jin efficiently dumped the spoils into his inventory portal, he remarked that they were now eligible for the Bronze Class Advancement Test. Kloe readily agreed, eager to head back to the guild and report everything to Fine. Back at the guild, Fine diligently assessed their mission report, then promptly initiate the Bronze Class test process. Kloe commented that they had focused on gathering and completing multiple tasks and finished everything within a mere 3 days. However, Fine pointed out that Jen didn't appear overly thrilled about challenging the Bronze Class so soon. He responded that while he was pleased, he wished to avoid standing out excessively by ranking up too quickly. However, Fine countered that staying at his current rank for too long would inevitably make him more conspicuous. Moreover, she notified him that Ashoka had already issued a strict confidentiality order regarding him, prompting Jen to realize that, despite it happening sooner than expected, ranking up was indeed the more convenient path. He contemplated that even unforeseen events were to occur. Bronze or higher adventurers possessed the freedom to move between countries and towns, and there was certainly no reason to decline if the guildmaster herself was safeguarding his information. Additionally, he inquired if Kloe could also undergo the test as part of their team and find a degree without a single complaint. She then elaborated that the test followed a one-on-one practical format, and that Kloe possessing greater experience than Jin would be evaluated first. Jin grasped the gist of it, offering his best wishes to Kloe and playfully calling her senior. However, Kloe responded that he seemed more like the senior here. Jin further ventured that given Kloe's bronze class, she would face at most a silver class examiner. But Fine interrupted with an unfortunate news, revealing that their actual opponent was a gold class adventurer. When Jin inquired about the opponent's nature, she explained they were formidable swordsmen with a touch of magic, one favorite speed and refined skill over brute force. His face immediately twisted into one of a concern as he questioned whether she was speaking of Elsa. However, Fine denied it, explaining that Elsa rarely showcased her formidable skills publicly. He further inquired if they could employ magic during the test, to which Fine assured them they could, but added they would be using only the weapons provided by the guild. She then questioned if they had any further doubts, to which they respectfully declined, thanking her for her precious time and thoughtful consideration. In response, Fine offered a polite smile as she expressed that it was her job to meet her partner's requests after all. Soon after, they reached the fighting arena, and Jin was amazed that the test venue was situated directly underneath the guild. Where Kloe was visibly nervous on the other hand, Jin was rather excited, which prompted her to inquire if he was deliberately teasing her. Just then, a figure emerged from behind them and commented on their remarkably calm behavior. That figure was none other than their gold-ranked examiner, Ange, who greeted them both with composed grace. Jin and Kloe exchanged their introductions, and Anger remarked that Jin was indeed as polite as she had heard, further expressing that other adventurers should take a page from his book. She then turned to Kloe and stated that she would be the first to take the test. As Kloe affirmed, Age suggested they begin their preparations. She then took Chloe's side, allowing her to choose a weapon that suited her best, as this was part of the examination. She further required whether the sword's length and size fitted Chloe's combat style, or if the balance felt right in her hands. Age also demonstrated that if everything was in place, she could tell by the precise sound of the swing. As Kloe successfully chose her weapon, Ange marked the official beginning of the test. Kloe felt the surge of tension building within her, and her limbs went stiff with nervousness. But Jin encouraged her to fight like she always did, and give it her best shot. Upon witnessing this exchange, Ange couldn't help but comment that Kloe had indeed found herself good friends. Find and announce the beginning of the match, and Kloe pounced at Ange with her sword head on. As Ange effortlessly deflected it, she calmly mentioned that Kloe would be easily countered if she made such large, predictable moves. Kloe furthest won her sword with full foresheet, but Ange obstructed her attack without visible effort. Immediately, Kloe leaped backward, prompting Ange to comment that she was faster than expected. Just then, Ange prepared to attack and rush right at Kloe with her sword posed, but as soon as Kloe blocked it, Ange stated that she was being too soft in her defense. Without any warning, and struck her forcefully, and Kloe barely managed to block the blow. As Ange kept up her relentless attacks, she declared that Kloe could get seriously hurt as she believed it was just a wooden sword. From the sidelines, Jin encouraged her to keep fighting, which uplifted Kloe to regain her spirit, and kept attacking relentlessly. She was determined to maintain a faster pace, believing she could win the fight. As she swung her sword again, Ange managed to evade it with ease. In the midst of their engagement, Ange calmly told her that she possessed quite unusual eyes. Kloe rushed at her once again and continued attacking at an increased speed. But Angel was evading each and every single one of them with remarkable fluidity. Without any warning, Angel lunged at her with her sword. However, Kloe, having predicted her attack pattern by observing her stance, positioned herself accordingly. But to her surprise, Ange cleverly outsmarted her and appeared subtly behind her to playfully smack her head, just then find to clear the end of the fight. Meanwhile, Jin had been keenly observing Ange's attack patterns and stances. He noted that Ange had skillfully distracted Kloe with a fake stance, making her anticipate a side attack, only to execute a surprise fiend at the very end. Though caught off guard, Kloe kept her eyes fixed on Aang. As Kloe tearfully approached him, stating her loss, Jin calmly reassured her not to worry, emphasizing that the exam was based on skill, not victory. He further encouraged her, affirming that she would definitely pass the test, given her remarkable speed and abilities. However, Ange intervened, suggesting he worry about himself first as he was the one to fight her next. As Jin decided he would pay Ange back for Kloe, Ange told him not to hold back as he had already observed their match. Jin was quite impressed by the gold-ranked adventure, knowing fully well that Ange hadn't even been fighting seriously with Kloe. That was precisely why he decided not to let his guard down for even a moment in front of her. As he stood opposite to her, Jin pondered that, although he didn't want to use it, he might have to play his trump card midway through the match. Just to be sure, he inquired if it was truly okay for him to go all out, and Ange affirmed without a hint of hesitation. As soon as Fine commences the match, Jin reacted swiftly, attacking Ange in this blink of an eye, leaving both Fine and Kloe stunned. Though Ange managed to block the lightning fast assaults, and calmly suggested he not jump the gun, but Jin calmly remarked that it applied equally to both of them. Simultaneously, they both sprang backward. Ange then inquired about his true identity, as he certainly didn't seem to be merely a copper-ranked venture. In response, Jin simply stated that he was just a rookie adventurer. She found him truly interesting, and as she rushed to attack, she announced she would see how far he was willing to go. Though Jin appeared to struggle, he skillfully sidestepped every one of her attacks, all while contemplating that despite the skills, the experience gap was overwhelmingly vast, and he would be easily overpowered if he simply kept swinging. As Ange seemed to have the undeniable upper hand, she playfully inquired about his initial confidence, asking whether he hadn't mentioned going all out. However, Jin didn't back down, responding with a grin that it took him a while to get serious. Furthermore, he decided to finally unveil his trump card, a new ability acquired from his recent victory over the goblin leader in dungeon. Moreover, if he was to unleash it against her, he resolved to hold nothing back, giving his absolute all. Instantly, he took a deep breath, then activated his body enhancement skill, the surge of power leaving everyone stunned, including Aimed herself with a confident smirk. He thanked Anne for waiting for him, asserting that he was truly going all out now. Ange scoffed, commenting that he possessed enough confidence to be truly cocky. Meanwhile, Jin suddenly shifted his stance, eager to test the true strength of his newfound skill. Jin swung his sword to test the new surge of power within him, and instantly he met Angel's gaze with a confident smirk. As both of them lunged towards each other, their clashing of swords echoing throughout the test field, she immediately realized his speed and power had indeed skyrocketed. She further comprehended that she would have been toast if she were even a tad bit careless. However, she snickered and commented that it seemed their spar had escalated beyond a mere test. In turn, he questioned if she wasn't planning on making it easy for him either, and if she still had a trick or two up her sleeve. Yet she assured him he didn't have to worry about winning or losing. But Jin scoffed at her remark, calling it a funny joke. Angel immediately readied herself and activated a series of her skills simultaneously: Magic Boost, Light Magic, and Mirage Illusion. In the blink of an eye, her appearance began to blur as she completely vanished into thin air, leaving the onlookers completely stunned. Upon seeing this, Jin composed himself, realizing she couldn't actually just vanish out of the blue. He decided not to rely on his eyes, but to feel a magic through his enhanced senses. He immediately activated his magic detection and located Anje, who was poised to attack right behind him. As she revealed herself, ready to strike, Jin outsmarted her, and vanished from her sight only to reappear directly behind her, catching her completely off guard. Jin immediately swung his sword, but gently tapped her instead, with a victorious smile on his face as he claimed his victory. Ainge shook her head in disbelief, stating that he not only saw through her trump card, but also went easy on her, further calling him an amazing kid. Kloe also cheerfully shrieked and celebrated his partner's victory. Furthermore, Ainge mentioned that although it was a shame the exam was officially over, she then extended her congratulations to both of them for their promotion, proudly announcing that both Jin and Kloe were now bronze-tiered ventures. Hang, then, playfully asked to Fine disagreed with the results, but Fine delightfully stated that it had been the ultimate test, and she wouldn't disagree with any part of it. Moments later, the Fire Dragon Inn buzzed with celebration for Kloe and Jin's well-earned promotion. Ricardo explained that when Jin first arrived, he'd simply thought of him as some random kid. But before he could express further, Jin suggested him to not dig deeper and start wrapping things up. Ricardo, admitting that he was not accustomed to such things, generously congratulated both Jin and Kloe on their advancement to bronze rank. They all cheered, raising a toast to their victory. Cynthia, who was also present at the celebration, commented that her eyes hadn't deceived her about Jin when she first saw him. She then slightly informed him she had some new stuff on hand, suggesting he buys something for the occasion. Meanwhile, Jin's friends were visibly surprised to see a beautiful elf among his acquaintances. Just then, Elsa intervened, asking Jin it was truly all right for her to crash their celebration. Jin agreed, citing her desire to hear about their move during the exam. In a playful and teasing manner, Elsa then offered to teach him all about it in her room, further stating she would cast a special spell just for him. Seething with anger, Fine appeared with her frying pan in hand and began chasing Elsa away from him. On the other hand, Asuka inquired about his experience crossing swords with a gold-ranked adventurer. Jin responded that he was glad he had his Bodhi enhancement skill. Moreover, he revealed that the fight was more about combat experience than basic abilities, and even though he managed to handle Ange's magic, he wasn't quite satisfied with his feat. To his surprise, Asuka suddenly leans towards him, asking with a subtly intense gaze if he had any further issue. However, he felt a sudden wave of overwhelming pressure wash over him, as he realized he had to eventually beat formidable targets like her. Shifting the topic, Jin cleverly mentioned that he wanted her to meet his elf friend, Cynthia, who wished to introduce various new items to her. Seizing the opportunity, Cynthia showcased a new magic stick that stored magic power designed to recharge their reserves whenever they ran out. Asuka appeared quite intrigued by the item, and as they became deeply engaged in discussion, Jin seized that opportune moment to flee from the area. On the other hand, Kloe encountered him and they both raised their glasses for their heart-won promotion. At that very moment, she inquired if she had truly fought well against Ange. In response, Jen assured her that she had moved better than you had imagined. Immediately, Angel arrived at the scene and advised Claude have more self-confidence. She further explained that these folks' physical abilities were unmatched compared to other races, and that she believed Kloe possessed a special talent on top of that. As Kloe appeared a little confused, Ange leaned towards her and clarified she was referring to her eyes. She affectionately patted Kloe's head and advised her to strengthen her gaze to truly enrich her adventure life. Jin silently commended Ange's insight, for he knew Kloe was renowned for her exceptionally sharp eyes in the game. Kloe's moves during the exam clearly went beyond the initial setting. Jen reminisced that in the first half of the fight, Kloe merely reacted to movements, but in the latter half, she was predicting them faster than she could even see. It was as if she possessed a power to see the future. Right then, Jin claimed he believed Kloe would become an astounding adventurer, a compliment that visibly delighted her. Just then, Ricardo arrived with tempting dishes and advised them to simply enjoy their celebration, instead of dwelling on the exam. However, Jin thought to himself that he should stick to the copper rank for a while, as too much fame spreading too quickly could disrupt the story. Find also approached congratulating him and praising the amazing skills he'd showcased that day. Jin offered his gratitude, stating he would now savor the food and relax. Then she inquired if he was free later, to which he responded with an unfazed expression that eating and resting were also key duties for adventures. Out of nowhere, Asuka arrived and offered to take over from Fine. She then revealed there was a special request, just for the two of them, advising that she would leave the decision to them. Jin felt an immediate bad omen and instantly refused without any hesitation. But Asuka ignored his response and repeated her inquiry, asking if they would accept the request. This prompted him to finally realize they truly had no other choice. She then began explaining that they simply had to narrate their encounters to someone important, and further clarified that they couldn't refuse this request due to guild relations. Upon hearing this, Jin contemplated that if even the guildmaster couldn't refuse the request, then it must involve someone in a significantly higher position. He further pondered that if this important figure was a minor noble, it might be fine. But if it were royalty, it could severely alter the story. With a hint of hope, Jin inquired if they weren't, in fact, royalty? But Asuka's definite expression instantly crumbled all of his remaining expectations. She further disclosed that their client was none other than the Alice von Durld, the very princess of the country. Upon hearing that, Jin immediately realized they would be doomed if they dared refuse to comply. He inquired why a princess would specifically request them, who she had never met before. In response, Asuka explained it seemed Her Royal Highness might simply wish to learn about the outside world from adventures her own age. Moreover, Asuka admitted she didn't know why Jin, in particular, had been chosen for the task, further inquiring if he had recently made a scene. Without delay, he responded that he indeed had, recalling the 2 separate instances he'd beaten up the bully in the street. Asuka apologized to him beforehand and asked him to somehow handle the situation, stressing that the guild would vanish by morning if she dared decline. Jin complained that he gets sent something fishy from the very beginning, pointing out there was no way the guildmaster would attend a mere copper-ranked trial. Meanwhile, Asuka cracked up at his comment, mentioning that sending him off as the fastest promotion ever made her quite happy. Just then, he turned to Kloe and remarked that this request seemed exceedingly shady, further asking if she was truly all right to partake in it. Though Kloe seemed a little skeptical at first about this suspicious special request, her hesitation soon vanished when Asuka assured her it was an easy task, entirely free from danger or further suspicion. Everyone then raised their toast again, celebrating their very first special request. The next morning, Jin and Kloe arrived at the Exiled massive castle of the princess. Both were quite astonished upon encountering such a huge structure. She inquired if they were truly stepping inside to speak with the princess herself. Meanwhile, he pondered that any sleep from the game story might correct their path, as he was quite determined to ace that request no matter what the cost. The mansion guards escorted Jin and Kloe through the halls towards Princess Fire's private chamber. Kloe's hand trembled at the thought of meeting the capital's princess, while Jin admitted that he was on the edge too, prompting her to mention she simply wanted to hear that it would be all okay instead. However, Jin's nervousness drove from a different source than Kloe's. Beyond the hero and maidens, several crucial characters existed within the game's storyline. Princess Fire was a key figure among them, holding the significant role of a saint. Jin resolved to tread carefully, determined to avoid meddling with the established storyline. Soon after, they stepped inside the private chamber and introduced themselves to the princess. Fire greeted them warmly, introducing herself as the Princess of the Dirt Kingdom. She then politely invited them to come close her chamber, granting them permission to speak with informality. On the other hand, Kloe's body language screened anxiety, with tension radiating from her every muscle. Just then, Fire suggested they dive straight into the main topic. Upon hearing this, Jin sought confirmation, asking if the request wasn't simply to hear about their adventures. He further inquired if that was truly the sole reason she had summoned them. With an egoistic expression, Fierce asked if he was suggesting she had summoned them under false pretenses. However, she didn't bother concealing it further, admitting she indeed had a different reason for calling him. She then brought up his past actions, recounting how Jin had taught a thug a lesson to save a girl in town, casually paid for 10 days straight at a tough end, single-handedly dispatch a horde of monsters and even save Kloe from betrayal. Above all, she mentioned that he was once a noble, and that his sword and magic skills were quite intriguing, despite his apparent lack of formal training. Jin broke into cold sweats upon hearing about all his deeds directly from the princess herself, and asked if that was all she knew about him. Fire admitted, stating that although Kloe was quite an interesting character too, there were simply so many intriguing tales about Jin alone. further questioning if there were more secrets hidden beneath his calm expression. Right that instant, he vividly recalled Fire's backstory. That bored by a long life confined within the castle walls, she was a peculiar princess, known for collecting and treating people with tragic pasts and actions. Jin couldn't think straight in that moment, questioning himself how he could possibly have forgotten something so crucial. Fascinated by his visible reaction, she asked in a suitably mocking tone if the room was too hot for him. Despite his unease, Jin managed to comment that the royal family surely had access to such detailed information. However, Fire has admitted that while his noble background was indeed easy to obtain, his adventures were remarkably difficult to uncover. Moreover, the information about him had trickled in rather gradually, even through the guild. She further highlighted one piece of information that truly caught her attention, which was his abilities. She then questioned how he managed to acquire such refined power aspects, given that he was shunned by the Larginia family and had lived in seclusion for 12 years. She even mentioned that his skills surpassed those of her own guards, which made Jin realize why those very guards had seemed so vigilant earlier. With a seemingly calm expression, Jin told her she had overestimated him far too much. Meanwhile, Fierce confessed that while she had many points she wished to contest, she wouldn't pressure further for the time being. Just then, an awkward silence settled in the room before, or Fire has finally broke the tension, stating that normally, adventurers became so nervous they would spill everything whenever she spoke to them. Jin immediately glanced to Kloe, who remained frozen with anxiety, and asked if Theorus was perhaps hinting towards her. He then admitted that he was nervous too, but a disbelieving sigh escaped Fire asleep as she mentioned they would be meeting again. Bewildered, Jin asked her to repeat herself, then abruptly clamped his hand over his mouth, unable to believe he had let that slip out. Seeing his reaction, she inquired why he looked so displeased, but he hastily tried to explain that it wasn't the case. She then revealed that she had made sure to mention it in the request form, and that she'd like to hear more of his stories. As Jin seemed a bit reluctant, Fear shimmered delightedly, and explained there was no way she would let him go at any cost, because a talent like his that could entertain her was truly rare. She assured him she would save their time together, but he couldn't help but ponder that he had attracted yet another dangerous individual. Jin further contemplated why he always seemed to catch the eye of troublesome characters, especially when he was trying so hard to stray from the story's path. He let out a weary sigh, but Fire's only chuckle at his miserable expression, stating with nonchalance that his troubled expression truly delighted her. Meanwhile, he inwardly begged her to stop her chilling behavior. He then threw a subtle glance at Kloe, and having realized she seemed totally useless in the situation, he inquired if they could finally talk about their adventure. Fire has agreed joyfully and suggested discussing it over dinner. On the other hand, Jin couldn't help but think that this was true to Fierce character's setup, a princess who yearned for the outside world. However, when the hero appeared and the fight against the Demon King intensified, she was supposed to join the hero as a saint. Shortly after, as they made their way to the dinner hall, Jin was relieved that Kloe seemed to have regained her composure. However, she soon stiffened when Fire stated she would live to hear about her stories too, while Jin silently encouraged Kloe to hang in there until the job was completed. Out of the blue, they unexpectedly stumbled upon a formidable figure, and Jin's face twisted into dread as he realized it was none other than Rifondrus, Fire's father and the king of the royal capital. A while later, they all sat at the dinner table and closed face, being upon seeing the delicious cuisines laid out before her. Jin expressed that he was also honored to be there with them, while Rifondrus encouraged them to eat heartily, like an adventurer should, to which Kloe thanked him gladly, further calling him Mr. Upon hearing that, Jin turned pale. It seemed that Kloe didn't know the man's true identity, but before he could tell her, Rifondrus intervened and inquired how their conversation had gone. Fierce responded that it had been a delightful time, further addressing him as father, leaving Kloe utterly stunned. As they all sat at the dinner table, Kloe's body trembled with anxiety as she inquired how they had ended up in that situation. Jin responded that it was all because of Fire. Meanwhile, Fierce anciently mentioned that unexpected twists were simply a part of the adventure. Rifondrus expressed his gratitude to both of them for sharing their delightful tales with his daughter, drawing a nervous, awkward chuckle from Kloe. Yet Jin calmly explained that it was all part of his duty, expression his honor at the king's high praises. However, Rifondrus laughed it off, stating there was no need for such formalities as those words were from a father, not a king. Risking much, Jin asked if it was truly acceptable for him to speak in such a manner to a mere commoner. He paused for a moment before asking if Jin truly meant that, assuring him that he was watching everything closely. Upon hearing this, Jin panicked inwardly at the unique unsettling characteristics of both father and daughter, but he tried to play it cool by mentioning that he tended to forget unpleasant memories. Right that instant, Theorist offered to jog his memory, mentioning she'd heard rumors about him breaking off an engagement and being cast out by his family, further inquiring for full details. However, Jin kept his lips sealed and refused to elaborate any further, prompting her to shake her head in disbelief. Rufandra's chuckle led his behavior, stating that he now realized why Fierce was having such a tough time with him, further advising that Jin's secrecy was a bit excessive. With a dark, gloomy aura emanating from him, he stated that it was no wonder everyone suspected him of being against the royal family, finding this act quite odd, even unofficially, for a king to focus so intently on one adventurer. Jin commented in the heat of the moment that if that were the case, Princess Fires wouldn't be there now. Immediately, the anger guards positioned themselves, placing their swords directly at his neck, hinting that another careless word from him would cost in his life. In a firm tone, Rufandra's advice tended that he not view him as immature, subtly threatening that he wouldn't stay calm if Jin mentioned his daughter's name again. His expression thickened as he commanded Jin to reveal everything that had happened a month ago. Seeing the king's true nature, Jin calmly inquired if that was an order from his majesty, and Rufandras retorted that it was indeed an order. Fierce had truly gotten the better of Jin this time, and he already harbored suspicions that their stumble upon his majesty on their way to lunch was no coincidence. Even having lunch with guards inside the castle hinted that they were wary of them. Or perhaps it was merely more theatrics to satisfy Fire's curiosity. However, Jin pondered that it would be better to simply be honest so they could leave the palace sooner. He then began to reveal his past, stating that when he turned 12, he was falsely accused of stealing the family treasure, a revelation that left Rufandras quite startled. Jin displays everything that had happened to him over the past few months, mentioning that his life grew incredibly tough after his mother passed away, leaving him no other option but to abandon that palace. Upon hearing this tragic story, Kloe's eyes well up with tears, and she gently reassured Jin that he wasn't at fault. He tried to calm her down, stating it was all in the past, and that leaving home had ultimately led him to meet good people like Kloe. Having heard everything about Jin, Rufandras rose from the table and apologized for interrupting their lunch, further mentioning that he had to go finish his leftover work. Before departing, they exchanged farewells, and Jin was immensely relieved they had managed to get through it. After that, Jin turned to Firus, who couldn't quite meet his gaze, and suggested she not recklessly seek entertainment, emphasizing that her actions had almost gotten Jin killed by her protective father. He saw right through her, inquiring if the chance encounter with the king was indeed her doing. To this she agreed, stating that she had to get her father's help because Jin was being so secretive. Appearing guilty, she apologized for going to such lengths just to learn more about him. He didn't say much but firmly suggested she not do this again in the future. However, Fierce gave a vague answer, simply stating that she would consider his advice, further mentioning she never knew when he would keep secrets from her again. Jin somewhat knew this was coming and inquired that it was truly necessary for her to know everything, given that they hardly knew each other. In response, Fires revealed that she had planned to have them both visit the mansion occasionally, leaving Kloe utterly astonished. Clown inquired if they were discussing something like that, as she didn't recall such a conversation, to which Jin commented that she appeared to be completely out of order. Moreover, he told Firuse they could just decline her offer, but she calmly stated that she would come visit them instead. However, she couldn't go alone naturally, so her soldiers would also be accompanying her, along with her overprotective father. Stress washed over Jin as he gripped his head in frustration, contemplating why he always attracted such troublesome characters when he had been planning to travel to a place completely unrelated to the story once he had saved enough. On the other hand, Firus allowed a soft chuckle at his miserable state and commented that seeing him in trouble really warmed her heart. He didn't have any choice but to agree, requesting her to refrain from visiting when they were busy with requests. Fire has explained that there wouldn't be any news stories if she called him daily, so the most wise choice was to summon him when he had accomplished something, or whenever she was free. Upon hearing that, Kloe couldn't help but inquire with a disoriented expression, as she would be called to. Moments later, when Jen and Kloe were departing the mansion, Jen explained that the day had primarily been about his story, but Fires seemed intrigued by Kloe too. He further claimed that she was going to be the one to face Fire as scrutiny next time. But regardless, Kloe mentioned that she was just an ordinary girl. Back at the guild, noting their utterly wiped-out expressions, Fine inquired about their well-being with concern. Jin explained in a weary tone that he just had a little chat with the princess, while Cynthia promptly offered him her restorative magic recovery candy to boost his energy. Fine commented that the royal family was indeed quite talented, though some members were very imaginative. Jin mentioned he hadn't expected the king to appear out of the blue, to which Fine stated that Rufandras was fiercely devoted to his children and was merely worried about his daughter after all. Kloe couldn't help but interject that his life was exceedingly overwhelming. Furthermore, Jin revealed he'd already warned Fire as beforehand, asking Fine to space things out a bit more for next time. Fine agreed, assuring him with a gentle expression that she would handle that accordingly. Just then, Jin cited his utter exhaustion from the travel, wondering how beneficial it would have been to use meditation. Intrigued, Fine inquired about this meditation, and Jin explained it was a healing skill. However, Fine had never heard of the term before. Jin wasn't surprised by its insignificance, knowing it existed only within the cheap character notes, not the actual game storyline. The meditation skill simply boosted natural recovery, capable of healing damage even in no recovery zones. Unfortunately, Jin had no clue how one might acquire this skill in their current world. Out of the blue, Cynthia casually mentioned that it sure would be handy to use meditation, which instantly prompted him to bolt from his position and inquire how she knew about such a skill. Suddenly an idea seemed to strike her, and she informed Jin that she even knew how to acquire it, further adding that it was a bit pricey. However, Jen inquired why Cynthia was even at the guild, to which she explained it was simply for product delivery, nothing more than money-making purpose. She then commented in a mocking tone that she had in fact found an even bigger fish to fry. Jen hesitantly pulled out a single coin from his pouch and questioned how much he needed to pay, but she abruptly snatched his entire pouch instead, declaring it was a huge discount for him, and that he should be thanking her instead. Only then did Jin fully realize that this was indeed a cheat skill. Later that night he reached his room and flopped onto his cot, utterly exhausted. He thought that meditation was a special skill, one even heroes were known to possess. He activated his status board and realized his level had jumped by 2 in just a month, all thanks to his growth boost ability and its concealed hidden settings. Moreover, he pondered that Cynthia had been kind enough to share such a valuable skill with him, promptly deciding to acquire it before caught. Acquiring it wasn't a difficult task. He simply had to carefully blend his magic with nature, calm his mind, sharpen his senses, and feel its essence through his skin. As he activated his senses and gently extended them throughout the inn, he immediately pinpointed an unknown figure lurking just outside his room. He immediately demanded the unknown's identity and readied himself to defend, further warning that he wouldn't hold back if they refused to reveal themselves. The gate suddenly creaked open, and a significant older figure emerged, introducing himself as Zeph. Jin couldn't help but inwardly call this character stunning. While Zeph hoped for them to get acquainted from there on, Jin addressed him by his full name, Zeph von Rillis, and directly asked why someone from the royal service would visit him. Zeph was quite surprised Jin knew of him, but Jin didn't waste any time, asking if Fierce was intrigued by him and had sent Zeph to fetch him, though he added it couldn't simply be because the princess was interested. It must be a secret mission from His Majesty himself. Zeph was quite unique among those who served the royal family. Rufondres's public aide was the capable minister of Burdus, but truly, the one subtly supporting the king was Zeph von Rillis, cool, composed, and always calm. He handled all covered operations alone. With a fierce expression, Jin inquired whether he had come there to kill him. However, Zeph paused for a few minutes, for a moment before advising that Jin should learn a trick or two. Jin sarcastically thanked him for the advice, but Zeph further offered his apology, stating he might have overstepped a bit too much. He then revealed he had simply come to ask a few questions, explaining that after Jen and Kloe returned, Rufondres had asked him to investigate the Larginia family. Jin was quite astounded upon hearing that not he, but his family was being investigated by the king. He inquired about Rufondres' intentions with the Larginia family, to which Zephyr responded that it would depend on Jin's answers. Moreover, he revealed that Rufondres was even considering dismantling them as an option. This revelation left Jin completely stunned, as it was drastically different from the game's original setting. In the game, the Larginia family was merely warned for mistreating Jen, or was never dismantled. However, Jin decided to seize this unexpected opportunity because if he deviated from the main storyline, there would be fewer paths leading him to fall into darkness. Jin agreed to help, given Zeph's insistence, while Zeph simultaneously requested him to share everything he knew about the Larginia family. Jen calmly sat down and began his story, mentioning that his biological mother was poisoned by the Larginia. Zeph found the act quite unsettling, but the Larginia family's use of poison was something only the reincarnated Jin had discovered. In the game, even the protagonist didn't know about this, so Jen believed that revealing this crucial truth should significantly change the scenario. There was also a chance the Larginia family might simply disappear before the main story even began. Just then, Zeph questioned if Jin was absolutely certain his tale was genuine, stating that a mistake wouldn't cut it. Jin, however, was absolutely certain about the truth. Summoning a suspicious-looking potion from his inventory, He claimed it was related to the poison forced upon his mother, further revealing that while her body had already been dealt with, this potion might still hold crucial clues. Zeph was quite startled that Jin possessed such a key item and inquired if he could hold on to this piece of evidence. Jin responded that he had shown it for precisely that intention. Zeph added that evidence in his inventory, further assuring he would definitely come back another day to report on this matter. Jin believed that this would undoubtedly change the game's scenario, while Zeph suggested they continue their conversation. Shortly after, as Jin told him every piece of information he had about the Larginia family, Zuf began taking his lead and thanked him for his significant cooperation. However, before fully departing, Zeph paused for a moment, before asking why Jin would possibly hand such an important piece of evidence to him. That inquiry caught Jin off guard, and he began to form an excuse. Jin just wanted to survive, even if it meant changing the original storyline. However, there was no way Jin could say that out loud in front of him. In the heat of the moment, he firmly stated that he simply wanted to avenge his mother. Upon hearing that, Zeph placed a firm hand on his shoulder and explained with a reassuring expression that he would find the culprit no matter what. Jin offered his gratitude, all while realizing that this character was incredibly valuable, a powerful ally to have on his side. Jin's biological mother had been poisoned before he remembered his past life, so he couldn't genuinely claim to feel immense grief at that moment. However, the truth was that his anger at the Largagnia for living so nonchalantly was far greater. Jin contemplated that if only his mother had survived, perhaps the game's Jin wouldn't have fallen into darkness. Considering his feelings, it was no wonder the Larginia family might now face ruin. Just then, Zeph additionally notified him that there might be a request for him through the guild, unrelated to this matter. However, Jin couldn't help but have a really bad feeling about this. Zeph urged him to reconsider and mentioned that he was personally asking him to, further remarking that once fire set her mind on something, even wild horses couldn't drag her away from it. Additionally, he revealed that even Rufandris was worried sick about his daughter, and that it was his behind-the-scenes job to smooth things over with adventures. That being said, Zeph shook his hand and departed the scene. The next morning, as Jen and Kloe approached the reception desk, Fine immediately bowed deeply before them and offered a deep apology. She then revealed that Ashoka had accepted a royal request in Fine's absence. Kloe began to panic, desperately questioning what they should do, but Jen calmly suggested they at least hear the request details first. Fine informed them. The request was for escort duty, prompting Jin to immediately question if there wasn't any room for error concerning the princess's safety. Fine responded there wouldn't be any issue as long as they remained within the castle walls. However, regarding any dungeon, soldiers couldn't escort her, as the escort specifically needed to be around Fire's age. Furthermore, Fine revealed the escort duty itself would take place within the academy grounds. Jen's expression paled instantly upon hearing that, questioning why he was continuously dragged back into the game world when he was desperately trying to escape its narrative. Upon seeing his troubled expression, Fine inquired if he was all right, to which Jin replied he was just a bit dizzy. Moreover, an academy signified a place for studying, but Jin stated he wasn't that great at studying. Kloe shared the same problem, utterly freaking out and asking Fine what she could possibly do. Later that night, as he walked back to the inn, Jin couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The more he tried to stray from the original storyline, the more it seemed to pull him back. He contemplated that if this continued, he might inevitably end up on the dark path, further wondering what might happen if he were to leave that city altogether. Suddenly, he heard a commotion erupt from a nearby alley and immediately rushed to the scene, only to encounter a suspicious hooded man forcefully dragging a girl. Without a moment's hesitation, Jin lunged towards the man, swinging his sword to attack, but the hooded figure promptly countered the assault with ease. Jin demanded what he planned to do with the girl, but the man countered with another question asking what Jin thought he was doing so suddenly. They both sprang backward simultaneously, and the man commented that although Jin seemed like an adventurer, he appeared to be heavily mistaken about the true situation. Jin stated he was clearly a kidnapper targeting girls, all while thinking that the man was significantly stronger than he initially seemed. On the other hand, the man called him harsh for addressing him as a kidnapper, but Jin paid not a single bit of attention to his words and lashed out, determined to at least buy enough time for the girl to escape. However, the man sidestepped his every attack with effortless grace, but Jin was not one to back down. He activated his magic-enhanced wind spell and immediately attacked the man, but the man, using his fluid movements, effortlessly evaded the wind attack and called Jin's magical skill impressive. Jin, on the other hand, remained speechless that his perfectly timed spell had been deflected so easily. Out of the blue, guards arrived at the scene and commanded everyone to freeze. Relieved, Jin immediately told the guards to apprehend the kidnapper. But to his utter surprise, the guards went straight for the girl instead. Jin remained speechless at the bizarre turn of events. But he was completely dumbfounded when the guards thanked the man and revealed that the girl was a notorious thief who had been troubling them for quite some time. As the guards left the scene, Jin hastily approached the man and bowed deeply, apologizing for misjudging him. However, the mysterious man greased his shoulder and assured him not to dwell on it, as the situation was already resolved. Moreover, he mentioned that he had enjoyed their brief fight, further stating that he believed they would meet again someday. Additionally, he suggested that Jin show him his true powers when the time comes. As the man departed, Jin contemplated that even though he hadn't been at full power, he couldn't picture winning against him. Furthermore, Jin was now even more curious about the man's true identity. The next morning at the academy, Fyrus extended a warm greeting to Jin and Kloe. With confidence, Jin mentioned that their presence was for a royal request after all. Unexpectedly, another figure emerged from behind Fyrus, smoothly inquiring if those two were her supposed bodyguards. And upon seeing Jin, he instantly recognized him. When questioned by Fires, he simply stated it was a bit of a coincidence. Upon seeing that man, Jin instantly recognized him as the legendary swordsman, Sword Saint Julius, who was destined to be the hero's mentor in a game's original storyline. Fires further informed them that Julius would be the one to spar with the bodyguard candidates, which left Kloe utterly stunned. Jin was now certain that the more he strove to stray from the script, the more it pulled him back. For no other reason could possibly justify encountering such important characters so early. Julius then casually revealed that they had shared an unofficial light spar the previous night, leaving both Virus and Kloe completely surprised. And Jin couldn't believe the hooded man he fought just last night was none other than Julius himself. Fierce inquired about his experience with Jin, to which Julius claimed Jin was a bundle of talent, further inquiring where she had possibly found such a gifted adventure. Upon hearing that, she commented it was rare indeed to hear him praise someone this much. She then talked about Kloe, stating that she would be fine too, further revealing that Kloe was, in fact, the daughter of the hero who saved the Beast Kingdom, a revelation that left Jin utterly astonished. Julius was fully ready for the spar. More specifically, he yearned to fight Jin and gauge his power to its full extent, as Jin hadn't yet showcased his full capabilities the previous night. Meanwhile, trembling with palpable fear, Kloe pleaded with him to go easy on her, but Julius stated flatly that he would be sparing with Jin first. Additionally, Julius playfully asked Jin to go a little easy on him, especially since Jin hadn't given his all in the previous night's battle. However, before they could proceed further, Julius was gently stopped when Fires graced his cape. She then turned to Jin, informing him there was someone else she'd like him to meet. She mentioned it was none other than the daughter of the Duke of Rufios, further questioning if Jin fully understood what she was hinting at. Furthermore, she revealed that it seemed Zeph, in his digging into the Largenia family matter, had stumbled upon some misunderstandings with the Rufios house and gotten a little too wrapped up in it. Jin, on the other hand, couldn't help but inwardly think that Zeph liked to meddle in various affairs. Jin knew there was only one young lady from the Rufios Duke's household who had any connection to him. Though he desperately wanted to refuse, he had to tread carefully and avoid a direct showdown with the influential Rufios family. Moreover, he couldn't quite comprehend why he kept getting closer to all these significant characters from the game. And to top it off, the one he was meeting at that very moment was the character he had been rooting for the most. If someone like that popped up right in front of him, it was inevitable he'd be utterly losing his mind from excitement. That lady was none other than his former fiancée, Flora von Rufios. As soon as he caught a glimpse of her, he couldn't help but blush uncontrollably. However, Flora's father was also present in the chamber, who Jin instinctively greeted and addressed as father-in-law. The Duke, however, immediately called Jin absurd for addressing him that way after breaking the engagement without a word. Jin offered his apology, but the Duke promptly shunned him down, stating he had already heard most of the story. Yet he declared he could not rest assured until he heard the whole truth from Jin's own mouth. Moreover, he expressed his deep sorrow, stating that his heart ached for Flora. Just then, Jin broke the tense silence between him and Flora by saying that it was their first time meeting face-to-face like this, or remarked Flora found strange, even though they had been engaged. With a desperate expression, she requested him to tell her what had truly happened within the Largenia family, as she wanted to know the whole truth for herself. Though Jin mentioned it was going to be a bit of a lengthy tale, Flora was willing to hear everything. After a while, Jin opened up to both of them, sharing his story of being cast out by his family and his decision to become an adventurer. Flora's father clashed his hand to his head, pointing out that he never imagined something like this could happen in such a prestigious family. He couldn't believe he'd been so oblivious to the truth about the Largenia family. However, Jin claimed it was all his fault for never explaining properly, asserting there was nothing wrong with him. But Flora's father complained that he had his own faults too, confessing he trusted his fiancée's lineage too much and never even bothered to meet Jin. He claimed he should have noticed the oddity with the Larginia family if he had just met Jin once. He then apologized to Jin, but Jin became flustered and waved off the apology, saying it wasn't really necessary. Flora's somber expression accompanied her own apology as she admitted her fault for not noticing anything. She further apologized for not being able to reach out to him, and for not being able to stay close to her fiancé when he needed her the most. In a nervously hurried manner, Jin asked her not to apologize, further stating that it seemed his engagement to someone in such a mess had only caused trouble instead. Moreover, he revealed with a smile that he actually quite liked living as a commoner and adventuring to various unique places. However, his statement was met with her father's intense glare as he inquired whether Jin was suggesting he was glad to be free from his engagement with Flora. Panic struck him as he desperately tried to explain that it wasn't what he meant at all. Sobbing, Flora inquired whether Jin truly thought so little of her. But he tried to explain that what he meant was that he was now a commoner, not a noble like her. She then subtly leaned towards him and questioned if the only thing separating them was status, to which Jin affirmed hesitantly. Her father's face twisted into a sly grin, aware the heat cornered Jin, who was now utterly entangled in the chaos. Jin then calmly suggested they put their past behind them and think about the upcoming future, a remark that brought a bright smile to Flora's face as she laughed warmly. With a hint of hope, Flora inquired if they could meet again. Meanwhile, Jin contemplated that even though getting closer to important characters was inherently dangerous, he couldn't bear to let his favorite character worry any more than she already had. Hence, he agreed without a moment's hesitation. On the other side of the academy grounds, Julius and Kloe were engaged in a heated spar when Jin arrived and met with fireists. She informed him that it seemed their fight was about to conclude, further inquiring how his conversation had gone. Jin responded with a victorious smile that there was nothing to worry about, and Fireus was visibly glad everything had concluded smoothly. On the other hand, Julius had smartly evaded Kloe's last attack and successfully cornered her. Fires concluded the match and praised Blow for her fantastic moves. However, with her head on low in disbelief, Kloe muttered that she couldn't even land a single hit on him. But Jin quickly encouraged her, stating it was amazing she even got to challenge the Sword Saint. Julius also intervened, remarking that Jin was absolutely right, and that he could easily trust her to protect the princess. Furthermore, he then announced that it was Jin's turn to fight him, further emphasizing that they had already warmed up earlier together. Jin met his remark with an equally confident smirk, and immediately readied himself for the fight. As the fight commenced, Julius immediately lashed towards Jin, striking with his sword with unrestrained foreshade. Yet as Jin successfully blocked the furious assault, Julius called him impulsive and revealed he had been aiming to blow him right away. However, Jin retorted with a sarcasm that it was very unfortunate. Jin sprang back instantly, but Julius engulfed his sword with refined magic, swinging his blade to unleash a powerful gust of air that struck Jin with considerable force. Jin was quite perplexed upon seeing such a display of magic, but Julius didn't give him enough time to breathe, maintaining his relentless attacks. He remarked that it was merely the continuation from the previous night, and further suggested they hold nothing back against each other. Though Jin was not one to back down easily, he swiftly activated his fire magic and formed a huge fireball to hurl towards Julius. But with effortless grace, Julius evaded it and praised Jin for harboring such advanced techniques. Jin then replied that he was better with magic than swords. As their blades clashed, the sounds echoing through the academy grounds, Jin inquired whether he was passing as a bodyguard. In response, Julius scoffed softly and affirmed that Jin was indeed the perfect candidate.